Merlin, the strongest yet the laziest Demon King, is forced to retire from his position to pay off his massive debts and moves to the human continent, running away from his responsibilities. He hides his true powers, pretending to be an ordinary loser, and earns a name for himself as the most infamous freeloader in town. Merlin Lucifer, our protagonist. Currently, Merlin is in the middle of writing the weekly report, when just outside, an unannounced army of human soldiers known as the Church Squad are just outside of his palace, battling his demon soldiers. Merlin's younger sister Lilith goes there to handle the situation and uses her dark charm magic to confuse and make her enemies fight each other. However, a single human soldier, one with an unshakable will, resists her magic entirely. She charges straight at Lilith and overwhelms her without hesitation. This woman is Alice, the 233rd hero of the Land of Light. Lilith, stunned, finally realizes that her charm magic had no effect because her enemy is a woman. So Lilith takes a more direct approach and jokingly attempts to seduce Alice, whispering to her that she wants her in her figurine collection. But before she can get far, Alice unsheathes her sword and engages her in an all-out battle. However, Lilith is the only one who lands a hit, which makes her realize that this generation's hero is nothing special and is pretty mid. Her comment triggers Alice, who retaliates by unleashing the full power of her holy sword. Still, Lilith doesn't take her seriously and attacks the holy sword with her hair made with dragon tendons, only for it to be torn apart in an instant, showing just how dangerous the holy sword truly is. Before long, Alice mounts Lilith, using her magical powers to cuff her hands and legs. With Lilith's defeat, the human soldiers celebrate their victory by shouting in unison, a noise that reaches Merlin's ears. At that moment, he finally snaps, tossing aside his paperwork to handle the disturbance. Meanwhile, with one enemy down, Alice gains the confidence to challenge the Demon King. She turns to the leader of their squad, the Grand Sage, asking for permission to march toward Merlin's palace. But the Grand Sage insists that he himself will be the one to eliminate the Demon King, who has killed countless human soldiers and heroes over the years, and is the reason why their crusades failed every single time. He then unveils his ultimate weapon, a siege machine shaped like a whale, an unimaginable force the Church has been preparing for a century. The Grand Sage proudly declares that this whale is the pinnacle of human wisdom and technological advancement, truly the Church's greatest masterpiece. He releases the whale from the sky, ordering it to level everything in its path. Alice objects, suggesting they don't need to resort to such extreme measures, but the Grand Sage is resolute. He's determined to eradicate all demons, believing it's the warrior's glorious purpose. He activates the whale, and its massive mouth opens to launch a devastating holy plasma beam at the demon soldiers, intent on reducing them to ash with a single strike. At that very moment, Merlin Lucifer steps forward, positioning himself in front of his soldiers, and effortlessly shields them from the attack while remaining unscathed. He farms some aura by pulling his hair back, then steps onto the battlefield, landing directly on top of Alice's head. Now that's some next-level disrespect. Lilith immediately embraces her brother, complaining about how these cruel humans have bullied her, while Alice, still trapped under his legs, struggles to crawl out. Eventually, Alice manages to get out and starts complaining, but Merlin completely ignores her and instead asks Lilith who this blabbermouth is. Lilith replies, calling her a garbage-tier hero sent by the kingdom to hunt them down. Merlin dashes toward Alice to take a closer look of her pretty face, gives her a quick smile, and then casually sends her flying with a flick of his fingers. He mockingly states that the Land of Light are getting sloppy with choosing their heroes, as he no longer needs to draw his sword to defeat them. The only thing that impresses him is the whale above, and he believes that maybe it can relieve the pain of his course for at least 2 days. Meanwhile, the Grand Sage steps forward and tells Merlin that he's here to return the humiliation of the last crusade. But Merlin doesn't even remember the event, nor does he recall who this old man even is. The Grand Sage tries to jog his memory, claiming to be the only human who survived their last battle and treating that as a major achievement. Merlin finally remembers and asks if he's that same coward who wet his pants and begged for his life, promising that if Merlin spared him, he would send more people as a gift to him so he can enhance his performance as a demon king. Hearing this, the hero and the rest of the soldiers are stunned, unable to believe that their leader stooped so low and even attempted to sell them out. The Grand Sage instantly denies the accusation, calling Merlin a liar while stuttering, and in a desperate move to silence him, he uses all his soldiers, gathering all of their magical energy and transferring it to the whale to increase its power 1,000-fold. But Merlin still doesn't see it as enough to bend even a single strand of his hair. Before the whale can launch its attack, he draws his dark blade, and with a single slash, he reduces the entire thing to rubble, completely wiping out the Grand Sage's plan. Realizing his defeat, the old man falls to his knees once again, and this time clings to Merlin's feet, begging for his life and throwing all the blame onto Alice, claiming that it was her idea to attack in the first place. At that moment, a bell rings from the castle, a reminder that it's time for the weekly meeting of the 7 Demon Kings. And Merlin now has to submit his weekly report. The realization hits him hard. He starts pulling at his hair in panic and rushes back to the castle, since he hasn't written a single word, leaving his enemies completely speechless at how the most terrifying Demon King is actually scared of paperwork. Alice tries to stop him midway, reminding him that they're still in the middle of a battle. So Merlin ends it right then and there with another sword slash, annihilating all the humans except Alice, who barely manages to shield herself. Back at the castle, Merlin joins the meeting with the other Demon Kings, who already know he's made zero progress in improving the Land of Darkness. No profit, no progress, and, obviously, no report. Merlin tries to defend himself, saying he just defeated an entire army of humans, a giant flying whale, and has been doing real work, but no one cares. They want numbers and profits, because the palace needs money to run, not dead bodies. They show him how much the other Demon Kings have contributed, making it painfully clear that compared to them, Merlin has done absolutely nothing except slack off. They call him the worst Demon King in history, decide to cut his next week's budget, and ridicule him to the point where he finally snaps. Merlin reminds them that he's the one who has killed millions of enemies, guarded the first palace alone, and kept the other 6 weaker Demon Kings safe all these years. He believes that's a feat no one else can replicate and tells them to stop questioning him. But the others still don't agree, pointing out the massive damage he causes every time he steps onto the battlefield. One of the Demon King, the ruler of lust, pulls out a long list of all the destruction Merlin has caused. Destroying the palace 168 times, wrecking infrastructure, breaking battlefield pipelines over 31,000 times, and reveals that because of all this, they've been cutting his salary. Even worse, he currently owes the kingdom a whopping $66 trillion. This debt explains why Merlin, despite being the strongest, was so scared earlier. He can't run, he can't resign, he has to work to pay off the debt. After the absolute disaster of a meeting, Merlin decides to escape. He plans to leave the Demon King's palace forever to run from his debt, sneaking out quietly, until Lilith suddenly appears behind him and scares him half to death. He shares his grand plan with Lilith, that hopes that once he's gone, the others will finally realize how much they relied on him and beg for his return. He even starts giggling, imagining his glorious comeback. Lilith, however, thinks he actually got fired, but Merlin insists he resigned to fix his cursed heart, which supposedly keeps shrinking. Although the curse is real, but this guy is clearly making an excuse. Apparently, the only thing that temporarily relieves the pain is slaying powerful enemies. He claims he'll now travel the world, hunting down the strongest foes to lift the curse once and for all. Lilith buys the story but still doesn't want him to go, knowing her brother won't survive a day in the outside world because he's simply worthless at doing anything else other than fighting. As she keeps insisting him to stay, he reveals he owes $66 trillion in debt to the other Demon Kings, and will have to work to death to pay it back if he stays here any longer. Hearing this, Lilith instantly changes her mind and sends him off, telling him to go find a new job and only return after making enough money to pay off what they owe. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield, Alice tries to play dead to avoid getting noticed by Lilith, who's casually wandering around. I mean, Alice is the only one left in the battlefield as the others have been reduced to nothing. so surely Lilith will notice her. And Lilith does, but she assumes Alice is dead and mutters how it's a shame that a pretty face like hers had to go so soon. She thinks of bringing Alice's body back to the palace to keep her as a part of her figurine collection, but moving her with all that armor would be a hassle. So instead, she decides to just take her head. But the moment she tries to incapacitate her, Alice flinches and moves away. Lilith bursts out laughing, revealing she knew all along that Alice was just pretending. This time, Lilith's done joking. She wants to punish Alice for embarrassing her earlier in front of her brother. Knowing she doesn't stand a chance, Alice bolts. Lilith, who loves a good cat-and-mouse game, summons 2 wolves to hunt down the pretty little mouse. Meanwhile, Merlin reaches the coast. To escape the demon continent, he has to cross the demon sea. He thinks he's in luck when he sees the leftover boats from the Grand Sage's army from the distance. But when he reaches the docks, every single boat has been completely wrecked, only now realizing that the same slash he used to wipe out his enemies earlier also destroyed the ships. Unfortunately, demons can't swim, even though there's the option to walk underwater, which leaves Merlin completely stuck, wondering how he's ever going to get out of this place. He has this small boat, but rowing it across the sea is too much of a hassle for him. That's when Alice comes running, still being chased by the wolves. Realizing that death is imminent, she finally remembers her master's words, how they always told her not to become a hero as she was still too weak and wouldn't stand a chance against non-human warriors. Back then, Alice didn't listen to her master's words, wanting to become famous. Moreover, staying with her master in barren snow mountains made her believe she'll never find the prince of her dreams. Only now does she understand that her master was right. This world is far too terrifying. She prays to the gods to let her live just once, promising that she'll only go out again after refining her skills. She somehow manages to gather enough strength to defeat one of the wolves, but the other transforms into its true demon form and completely overwhelms her. On the verge of death, she begs for mercy, screaming about how she wants to fall in love and have kids before dying. That's when her unlikely savior, Merlin, descends from the sky and casually turns the demon wolf into a harmless little puppy. He looks at Alice and comes up with a devilish idea to make her his slave so that he can get free manual labor. He reminds Alice, calling her a half-baked hero, that since he's saved her life, technically twice, she now belongs to him and must repay her debt by becoming his slave. Before she can even react, he lifts her up and takes her to the small rowing boat from before, planning to use her as a paddle engine to get across the demon sea, since he's too lazy to do it himself. Why did things have to turn out this way? Alice was supposed to defeat the evil demon king, win glory, and marry a handsome prince. This crusade was supposed to lead to her holding on to her handsome prince, but in reality, the only thing she is holding on to is a wooden paddle. Meanwhile, Merlin, who has nothing else to do, is striking a pose and farming aura. He tells Alice that she should cherish her position as his slave, calling it a blessing. But Alice murmurs to herself that this so-called blessing comes with 0 pay and 0 rest time. In any case, she keeps rowing the boat and tells him that she will repay him for this humiliation 1,000-fold once they reach her homeland. She channels her rage to row the boat super fast. But even in the rocking waves, Merlin stands firmly until she realizes he has stuck his foot against the boat to keep his balance. LOL. The day turns to night, and Alice eventually becomes exhausted from continuously rowing non-stop. On the other hand, Merlin brings out a stove from God knows where and cooks himself a delicious, steamy meal. While smelling the food, he asks Alice why she stopped rowing, calling her the most useless hero he's ever seen. Alice can no longer believe this guy. Her patience has reached its limits, and she throws the paddle at him, saying she quits. To get her back to work, Merlin offers to share his food, and even though initially Alice's ego doesn't let her agree, when her stomach starts growling, she gives in and eats the food. She finds it so delicious that she starts calling Merlin her master and breaks into tears, admitting that she's got no backbone at all. The smell of the meat attracts demon sharks, and getting scared, Alice runs straight into Merlin's lap. Merlin, with the slightest glare, scares the sharks away. Alice wonders why those monsters suddenly ran off, and Merlin doesn't miss the chance to brag, stating that in this entire ocean, the strongest creature is he himself, and that's why the sharks got scared. However, Alice doesn't think that's the case. She's heard that there's a sea monster living under this sea and hopes that they don't encounter it. To avoid its attack, apparently, they smeared some holy dragon dung on their ships, and hearing this, Merlin finally realizes why Alice's army smelled so stinky. She becomes defensive and goes on a very long lecture, telling him how the holy dragon's poop is more valuable than gold. But apparently, the dragon has mysteriously disappeared. If her words have the slightest truth in them, it means that if Merlin sells the dragon's poop, he might finally be able to pay his debts without working. So, he brings out a contract crystal that binds demon beasts and reveals that he has the holy dragon, who he's named Bucky, in his possession. He now wants to use Bucky's poop to repay his debt, and is kinda glad that he no longer needs to leave the continent. However, with a sudden twist of fate, Merlin's hand slips, and the crystal falls into the sea. With the crystal lost and Merlin unable to swim, he has no other option but to go to the land of light with Alice. Moving on, they notice how calm the sea has gotten all of a sudden. With no fish anywhere to be seen, Merlin suspects that there's a powerful predator nearby. Just as he says so, the sea monster reveals itself from beneath them. However, Merlin doesn't engage with the monster, revealing to Alice that he can't swim. So Alice takes the initiative herself and stabs the sea monster with her sword, which not only does no damage at all, but actually infuriates the monster. Merlin tries to convince the monster to do something significant in its worthless existence by ferrying them across the ocean, but the monster spits at him instead. It then tries to devour them by sucking down all the nearby water, and as the boat is about to crack open, Merlin finally draws his sword and, with a single slash, slays the monster. Merlin may be arrogant and shameless, but one thing is now clear to Alice: Merlin is the strongest being in existence. The rest of their journey goes smoothly, and not long after, they reach the shore. Merlin comments on how exhausting this entire trip was for him, even though he just slacked off and made Alice do everything. Alice points out his hypocrisy, but Merlin states that he did make a contribution by commanding her wisely. Otherwise, they would have never made it ashore. Yeah, right. In any case, Merlin believes that Alice is too useless for him to keep as his slave anymore, so he fires her, telling her not to be sad about it, as it was never meant to be. She literally can't believe the sheer audacity of this guy. She shouts at him, saying she never wishes to see his face again, and turns the other way. But Merlin stops her again, as he needs her help once more. This time, he asks her to take off her armor, and as she resists, he takes it off himself, but not because he wanted to see her sacred plot. Actually, he has no cash and wants to sell Alice's mithril armor for money. He thinks he deserves it since he saved her again by defeating the sea monster earlier, and dashes away, finally leaving Alice stranded there at the shore. Meanwhile, back at his castle, Lilith is chilling around because she believes that her hopeless, useless brother will just crawl back to her after realizing how hard life is in the outside world. When Alice returns to the city, she isn't welcomed warmly, but dragged into court, held accountable for the deaths of her comrades. The judge declares that it was due to her incompetence that the troops sent to subjugate Merlin were completely annihilated. On top of that, she's also lost her mithril armor, which had been passed down to heroes for generations. As punishment, the judge strips her of her status as a hero and demands she compensate the kingdom with 50 million gold coins. Alice tries to defend herself, saying her armor was taken by the Demon King, but her excuses fall on deaf ears. The verdict is already final. A year passes, and Alice is now seen on a ship, fighting two pirates who are holy tears, one rank above her in combat. She's here to rescue the mayor's daughter, taken hostage, but she's so bad at fighting that the pirates burst into laughter mid-battle. Just as they're about to finish her off, something unexpected happens. A man suddenly lands on top of the two pirates, crushing them beneath his feet. He wonders aloud where the two holy tier pirates went to, not realizing that he has crushed them upon landing, and Alice informs him that they're right beneath his feet. It's clear he's Merlin in his human disguise, and he has come after overhearing that the pirates were holy tears and wants to slay them to numb the pain of his curse. Before attacking, Merlin politely apologizes to the two pirates, saying it's nothing personal, and draws his sword, cutting them down with a single slash that creates massive shockwaves, which also destroy the backup ships Alice had called in. Alice, unable to recognize him as the Demon Lord since she hasn't seen his face yet, starts fantasizing about having a romantic encounter with this mysterious adventurer. She slowly walks toward him, eager to see his face, but Merlin flies away like Superman before she can get close. Not long after, a news reporter delivers a live report on the incident, revealing to the public that the entire rescue fleet was wiped out by a mysterious criminal already known across the nation as the Nightblade. Alice grabs the mic from the reporter and offers her very much unwanted opinion that Nightblade is not a criminal, but a hero who defeated the Holy Tier pirates. She starts gushing over him, saying she's never seen such a strong, graceful swordsman, and genuinely admits how much she admires him. Anyway, Alice returns home and adds 250 gold to her stash, bringing her total savings to 10,000 gold. She gets excited, thinking she's finally making progress, and she only needs 49,990,000 more to clear her debt. And that's when she realizes just how truly screwed she is. She curses Merlin for not only ruining her reputation, but also saddling her with a pile of debt she can never repay. She slams her table in rage and accidentally spills water on her guild commission papers, which she carefully goes through again, only to notice a 5,000 gold bounty on a man who's apparently been freeloading in the south. Of course, this guy is Merlin, and his smug grin makes that more obvious. Alice begins to suspect it too, but quickly dismisses the thought, convinced that the Demon King wouldn't stoop as low as freeloading. In any case, she has other things to do. Before leaving, she worships the picture of Nightblade's back, kisses it, and begs him to bless her with enough luck to pay off her debt. At the same time, she curses the Demon King, hoping he falls into an endless debt at least 10 times worse than hers. Speaking of the devil, Merlin has made quite a name for himself over the past year as a wanted criminal. But what really hurts his ego is the bounty placed on him, only 5,000 gold. He continues farming aura until his stomach starts growling, forcing him to stop posing. Lol. He shares his misfortune with us, explaining how his grand plan to sell the mithril armor and become filthy rich fell apart when he blew all the money in just a few weeks. Since then, he's been freeloading and scamming his way across the land, doing whatever it takes to survive. Now, he's searching for his next target and comes across a small town. But just as he's about to enter, two robbers approach him. Before they can demand his belongings, Merlin plays the Uno reverse card and demands theirs, leaving them confused, wondering if they've accidentally crossed paths with another robber. He insists he's completely broke, but the robbers want his sword. Merlin tries to scare them off, warning that if he draws it, their worthless faces will be wiped off the map, but they laugh it off, thinking he's bluffing. One of the robbers even decides to show Merlin what true skill is by peeling an apple with style. While the other robber is impressed, Merlin, possibly the greatest swordsman alive, is not. To show them what real skill looks like, he calmly places the younger robber behind him, then draws his blade, slicing the older robber into pieces in a single motion, exposing the robber's true goblin form. The younger one panics, revealing himself as a goblin too, and flees for his life, dropping the apple, which Merlin gladly eats before heading into the town. The younger goblin eventually informs His Majesty of the incident. The Goblin King sees it as a clear violation of their peace treaty with humans. In truth, this had been his plan all along. He had disguised several of his kin as humans and scattered them around to provoke a conflict. Now that some idiot has finally taken the bait, the Goblin King is ready. He commands his soldiers to raid the human town, loot everything they can, and take the women and children as slaves. Meanwhile, Lilith gets a letter from Merlin about how well his life in the Land of Light is, and how he now lives in a magnificent castle and is served by hundreds of servants. Yeah, buddy, a tent and a dog are your castle and hundreds of servants. The letter also claims that Merlin is extremely popular among women and that they line up to get his autograph. But the truth is very different. It's actually bounty hunters who've lined up after him. In any case, Merlin tells Lilith not to worry, saying his life is very enjoyable and that he won't be returning unless the other demon kings beg him to come back with a written formal apology. Lilith is happy to hear how her brother's doing and is glad she doesn't need to worry about him starving to death. Back in the town where Merlin went to freeload, he's already done at one of the shops and has defeated the shop's hatchet man. The shopkeeper gets scared upon recognizing Merlin, and Merlin gladly lets him get a good look at his gorgeous face, assuming someone has finally realized that he is the ruler of pride from the first Demon King's palace. However, the shopkeeper only recognizes him as the petty freeloader of the South, leaving him devastated by the fact that his entire reputation as the Demon King has been ruined because of his side quests. Anyway, the shopkeeper screams for help, yelling that the freeloader of the South has appeared, and in an instant, support arrives from everywhere. Not wanting to pick a meaningless fight, Merlin dashes away, yelling that he is not a freeloader. While walking back, he runs into a kid who is impressed by his looks and offers to pay him if he puts on a good performance. Merlin decides to put on a show for the kid, but at the last second refrains from drawing his sword. He doesn't want to risk the kid getting hurt. Still, he thinks he's done enough and demands at least 10 gold coins for his performance. But the kid, not so easy to fool, refuses and calls Merlin a pathetic loser for trying to scam people instead of getting an actual job. Merlin has had enough disrespect from this 12-year-old and, to make him pay, snatches the ice cream cone from the kid and throws it to the ground. The kid calls Merlin a demon, but Merlin doesn't take it as an insult because that's exactly what he is. He walks away in the opposite direction, just as a carriage pulls up and Alice steps out. She's on a mission and has arrived with a group of adventurers, one of whom wonders why Alice's hero status was revoked. At that moment, the man who bought Alice's armor from Merlin announces his new book, in which he details how the Demon King enslaved hero Alice and tormented her both physically and mentally. Perhaps he heard everything directly from Merlin when he bought the mithril armor. Alice can't believe what she's hearing and tries to convince the girl in the group that none of that ever happened. But the girl, trusting the random bookseller more, shows pity and says everyone has a past they wish to forget. Not wanting her reputation to be completely destroyed, Alice demands that the bookseller stop selling his stupid book, but learns that he's already sold over 5 million copies. Hearing this, Alice experiences what she calls a social life death and falls into depression. When she finally recovers from the trauma, the group discusses their mission to hunt down a band of goblin bandits living in a cave not far from the village. But before that, the couple in the group announces their plan to get married, which Alice finds ominous, because something tells her these nameless side characters are going to die for the sake of the plot. The couple discusses their future and keeps triggering foreshadowing flags like last mission, retirement, going back home, and nothing is going to go wrong. Alice tries her best to shut them up but fails and lets them go on their mission. She herself is on a different mission, to find the freeloader of the South. Speaking of whom, Merlin is at a tavern, eating everything on the menu before trying to sneak out on his tippy toes. But he gets caught by the manager, Martha, and has to make the excuse that he wants to apply for a job at her place. He claims to be a graduate from the Royal Academy and lists off tons of fake skills, even adding that he's never been in debt in his life. Martha still isn't impressed and doesn't think he's fit to be a waiter, so to convince her, he uses a skill he learned from the ruler of lust and literally starts disco dancing. I love the fact that this dance is literally in the opening song of this anime. Finally, Boss Lady Martha is impressed and maybe even wants to take Merlin as her husband. She hires him, offering to pay 1 gold per shift and a 15% commission on drinks sold. And Merlin, who was just playing along, now really wants this job. Martha tells him to start working that night and casually mentions she'll be deducting the cost of his meal from his first pay. She introduces him to her son, Henry, who turns out to be the same kid from before. This time, however, Henry can't insult Merlin thanks to Martha's presence. Anyway, Merlin's shift starts in a few hours, so for now, Henry takes him to the guest room. On the way, Merlin tries to make up for earlier by promising to teach Henry his ultimate blade strike for free if he lets bygones be bygones. But Henry refuses this once-in-a-lifetime offer, claiming Merlin doesn't even know how to swing a sword. He proudly declares that the only person he wants to train under is Nightblade, whom he idolizes as a justice-loving vigilante. Merlin is beyond flattered and proudly reveals to Henry that he is Nightblade. But instead of being amazed, Henry kicks him into the room and, fed up with his lies, walks off. On the other side, the group of adventurers who went to subjugate the goblin bandits are now surrounded by an army of goblins and are at their wits' end. Oh, who could have seen that coming? Definitely not Alice. The girl is about to be killed, and to save her, her boyfriend strikes a deal with the goblin mage. Going back to the tavern, the newest recruit is half slacking and half serving. Even though he's serving pretty fast, the customers aren't pleased and want the regular, "There you go, sir. Enjoy your drink-ass service." Merlin doesn't care, though, and tells the customer that he should feel honored to be served by him personally. However, it seems Merlin's only being rude to the male customers, as he gladly acts like a proper waiter for the ladies and even gives them complimentary cake. Bro is out here stealing others' girlfriends and literally puts on a performance for all the ladies there who are in love with him and with this tavern, while the males, let's just say their insecurities will no longer allow them to come here. Still, Martha, the owner of the tavern, is happy because her drink sales have skyrocketed, and she compliments Merlin, calling him a top performer. Merlin wants to record Martha's compliments and show them to the other rulers because they believe he's a zero. Coming back to Martha, she tells Merlin that all the girls of this town are raving about him, and so she wants to utilize this opportunity by publishing his information in the paper. Merlin knows if that happens, his entire reputation as the most fearsome demon lord will be tarnished. Not wanting that to happen, he begs Martha to not do it, telling her that he wants to have a low profile and promising to serve each customer well in exchange. Martha falls for Merlin's alluring words, and perhaps literally falls for him, but her son Henry is going to allow it. She doesn't want this freeloader to end up becoming his stepdad, and warns Merlin that if he ever tries to mess with his mom, he will beat him up. Merlin plays it nicely in front of Martha, but deep down, he really wants to spank this spoiled brat. Later, Alice is walking around town looking for traces of the freeloader when she overhears Henry, who's been loudly beating up a tree, saying, "Oh, I'll teach you a lesson, you freeloader." She shows him the bounty picture, and Henry somehow doesn't recognize Merlin's evil smirk. He tells her that the freeloader he was talking about works at his mom's tavern and is conning women into buying drinks, mentioning that he's generated half of their yearly revenue in just a few days. Alice doesn't think the guy is the freeloader she is looking for, but the men of the village want her to teach him a lesson anyway, because he's kind of stealing their women. They offer a bag of gold coins in exchange, so Alice accepts this new job and goes to the tavern to investigate the waiter, who goes by the name Daisy the Charmer. As she enters the tavern, she finds the entire place in chaos. Mostly women screaming and clapping for Merlin, who's putting on an over-the-top salsa dance for them. Although his eyes are hidden, his smile definitely matches with the picture on the bounty, and Alice confirms that he's the freeloader of the South. But she doesn't want to cause a commotion, as she knows he has great ways of escaping. So she tries to get closer to him first in the darkness, but as she approaches him, the spotlight points at her, and Merlin notices her. He, of course, doesn't recognize her worthless existence and forces her to dance with him. But soon enough, he does realize she's the half-baked hero he used as his slave a year ago. And at the same time, Alice realizes that the freeloader of the South is Merlin, the Demon King. The realization totally petrifies her, but when she remembers how much he's ruined her life already, she grabs her sword and tries to rapidly stab his face. Merlin, of course, dodges every single one of her attacks and asks her to be reasonable, reminding her that they are old acquaintances. But Alice doesn't consider him to be an acquaintance of hers and states that she wants revenge. Merlin mounts on top of her and, to calm her down, tells her about their time together and how they got along. Alice breaks into tears, telling Merlin if he feels no remorse for leaving her in such a state back at the beach. She expresses how much he has hurt her and blames everything she's been through on him. So, she tells him to take responsibility if he's truly a man. Her words can be taken in a different context, and the ladies hear something entirely different. They think that Merlin took advantage of her and then abandoned her. Realizing how much of a bad person he is, they decide to leave. Merlin demands Alice explain the misunderstanding to the ladies, but she keeps crying, telling him to give her back her armor. The tavern closes to resolve this situation, and Martha, who is also heartbroken thinking Alice is Merlin's girlfriend or something, tells him to sort out everything between him and her. Merlin has had enough. He tells Alice to stop crying because he thinks if anyone should be crying, it's him. He blames her for causing a scene and ruining his show. Not only is his reputation tarnished, but he also didn't get any tips tonight. But Alice believes everything she did is justified. She tells Merlin that she'll leave him alone if he gives her back her armor. Merlin doesn't understand, as he really believes that it was a gift from Alice to him for saving her multiple times. And even if he did take from her, he thinks it's justified because over the years, the Land of Light has looted a lot from the Land of Darkness. Alice doesn't care though, and just wants her armor back because if she manages to return it to the kingdom might close her debts. Unfortunately for her, Merlin has sold it for tens of millions of gold coins and has spent all of it in no time. But he tells her to not worry about it, saying that her armor was just a piece of junk. Alice still doesn't care and threatens to arrest Merlin if he doesn't give her armor back to her somehow. Hearing her threat, Merlin starts to smile like a villain, because who is she kidding? He reminds her of the fact that he defeated a sea monster with a single strike that scared her country's strongest navy, to the point that they placed dragon poop in their ships. So, she must be a fool if she thinks she or anyone in this country can arrest him. Alice also realizes that and throws away her sword. She tells Merlin that she owes the country 50 million gold in debt, and Merlin is impressed. In the course of this year, he only owes a few thousand gold coins here and there, and the fact that she somehow racked up 50 million is crazy to him. But what he doesn't realize is that it's all his fault. She, with her broken heart, finally explains everything to him, how the kingdom has saddled her with this massive debt for losing the armor that he stole, and how she had to join the Adventurers Guild and take on high-risk missions to save up money to pay her debts. Merlin ignores Alice's depressing story completely and puts his focus on the Adventurers Guild, asking her if there are really high rewards and holy tier enemies. He needs both money and strong foes to survive and can't let go of this opportunity, so he requests Alice to let him know how he can become an adventurer. After learning the process, he tries to charm her, saying that they are old buddies and she should refer him, saying that his childhood dream has been to become an adventurer. I must admit, bro is a pro liar, and Alice, seeing through his lies, tells him to just get lost. Meanwhile, Martha's son Henry is upset and is roaming around the gates of the town late at night as he doesn't want to go back to the place where the despicable freeloader is. At that moment, the guy who struck a deal with the goblin mage earlier comes to the gate, telling the guard to open the gate. Apparently, it's a rule that during midnight the gates cannot be opened, but the guy tells the guard to make an exception, stating that he's lost all of his comrades in a mission and has barely escaped. So, the guard lets him in, not knowing that there's an army of goblins hiding right behind him. With the gates open, the goblins launch an all-out attack, and the mage, who struck a deal with the guy, attacks him first, telling him to join his comrades as their slaves because goblins never negotiate. Henry overhears everything and quickly hides behind a pile of hay bales, scared for his life. On the other hand, Alice steps outside to calm herself down and wonders why the Demon Lord stripper dancer now wants to be an adventurer. She's upset that she'll never get that 5,000 gold anymore, as it's practically impossible to catch Merlin. The only thing she's certain of is that if she gets involved with him again, it will only bring her terrible luck. Her only hope now is to meet her Prince of Dreams, Nightblade, who she believes will save her from this demon. After venting her frustration, she looks around and notices the nearby houses are on fire. Meanwhile, two goblin brutes barge into the tavern. Merlin, assuming they're customers, welcomes them in, but when the goblins announce that they're here to loot the place, Merlin throws them out and assures the guests that there's no need to panic, winning their hearts yet again. Martha wonders why goblins are showing up at this time of night and becomes worried for her son, Henry, who hasn't returned home yet. She rushes outside, telling Merlin to handle things at the tavern, and he takes it upon himself to deal with the waves of goblins that keep coming one after another. After defeating them, he grabs his sword and heads out to help Martha, because if she gets hurt, he won't get paid for his work. Martha is almost reunited with her son, but the goblins get to her first and drag her off to make her their slave. Henry wants to help, but his legs won't move. He subconsciously knows that only death awaits if he steps out of hiding. On the other hand, Merlin casually strolls past the chaos, ignoring the goblins. But the goblins keep making the mistake of attacking him every time, and each attempt results in their demise. Alice confronts Merlin, convinced that he conspired with the goblins to attack the village. Merlin replies by asking how a hero could have such low IQ. He makes it clear that he, the mighty Demon King, would never stoop so low as to team up with pathetic creatures like goblins. He doesn't have time to deal with Alice's dumb accusations, so he ignores her and walks away. She suggests they team up to save the townspeople by driving out the goblin, but he's not doing it for free and demands 10,000 gold in return. Of course, Alice doesn't have the money, and he's the reason she owes 50 million, so there's no way she'll pay him a single penny. With nothing more to say, Merlin walks away, leaving Alice no choice but to defend the village on her own. She begins fighting off the goblins using her ice magic, taking them down one after the other, even though they begin to outnumber her. That's when the goblin mage steps up to battle Alice, claiming that even an elite tier mage like her can't win against an entire army alone. Just then, a younger goblin who had fled from Merlin when he first entered the town comes crying to the goblin mage, reporting that he saw that monstrous guy knock out half their warriors on the other side of town. The goblin mage looks through the eyes of her minions. That was the end of part 1. But guys, no need to wait for part 2. I've already uploaded it on my second channel. The link is in the end screen and the pinned comment. Enjoy watching. Reporting that he saw that monstrous guy knock out half their warriors on the other side of town. The goblin mage looks through the eyes of her minions and sees what Merlin is doing. His overwhelming strength makes her realize they're in serious trouble if Merlin and Alice end up teaming up. So she decides the best option is to retreat for now. With a sharp siren, every single goblin pulls out of the town, but the townspeople aren't truly saved. Many have lost their family, their mothers, sisters, and children, who have been abducted by the goblins. At that moment, a suspicious man steps forward, looking awfully like a goblin in human disguise. He offers the townspeople protection in exchange for 1,000 gold. Desperate, they decide to hire this chunky man, believing he's a top-tier bodyguard, and beg him to rescue their loved ones. But the chunky man instead tells them to forget the past and think about the future, assuring them that the goblins have probably killed their families already. But just then, the very guy responsible for this whole mess steps forward and informs everyone that the goblins are actually keeping their loved ones as slaves in their cave. The guard doesn't want to believe him. After all, this is the guy who tricked him into opening the gate. The townspeople surround the man, calling him a traitor, and the chunky man also moves to hurt him. But Alice jumps in to defend him, explaining the situation that forced him to make such a decision. She urges everyone to stop blaming each other and instead grab their weapons and follow her to rescue those who were taken. To prove she's dependable, she tells everyone that she's this kingdom's 233rd ranked hero. But that only makes the people more skeptical of her, as they've heard rumors of her selling herself to the Demon King as a slave. The chunky man joins in with the crowd, telling them not to trust the Demon King's slave and the goblin's lackey. He even suggests beating both of them up to avenge their lost loved ones. Alice realizes this fatty is bad news and shows him his place by kicking him in the gut, shutting him up on the spot. She then once again tells everyone not to take the coward's route and to join her in the fight, but when no one steps forward, she walks off alone. Seeing her leave, Henry calls everyone cowards. Not wanting to be like them, he steps up to assist Alice and heads to the tavern to retrieve his dad's old sword. That's when he runs into two goblin brutes who haven't yet left town. He bravely tries to fight them off, but ends up getting almost beaten up instead. Thankfully, Merlin shows up just in time, saves the day, and ends up getting super annoyed. He has to work overtime to find Martha, and these goblins just won't stop getting in his way. Merlin tells Henry to go to sleep since it's getting late, but how can he? His mom's just been taken by goblins. Merlin tells him to think wisely. He shouldn't play hero when he's this weak. If he does something reckless like that, he'll just end up getting killed, or worse, enslaved. Henry says he knows he's weak and probably won't be able to do much, but that doesn't mean he's gonna sit back and do nothing. He brings up how brave Alice is, going off alone to save everyone, and tells Merlin that even though he's not nearly as strong as his idol, Nightblade, he's still going to rescue his mom no matter what. The kid's determination sparks something in Merlin. It reminds him of a time when he and his sister, as kids, were trying to protect their mom. It's a brief memory, but it shows Merlin might have a heart somewhere under all that sass. Finally giving in, he decides, for once in his demonic life, not to act like a devil and goes to save Martha. Before heading out, he unsheathes his sword and tells Henry he should feel honored to witness the ruler of pride fighting for a human. But the moment he steps outside the tavern, he sees the town's completely empty. The goblins are gone, meaning now he has to go hunt for their hideout. Great. More work. Luckily, he overhears a group talking about heading to the goblins' cave and casually offers to lead them, but they're not interested. To them, he's just that freeloader from the tavern. Merlin insists he's a reliable warrior, but they just laugh, thinking he's just some tavern dancer who knows how to shake it for the ladies. Henry jumps in to defend him, saying Merlin already saved his life by beating 2 goblins, but they still don't buy it. So Merlin shrugs and decides to hand leadership over to Mr. Chunky instead. Meanwhile, deep inside the Goblin Cave, the Goblin King is giddy over how successful the mage's raid was. She smugly says this is just the beginning. They can plunder the town whenever they want. The king tries to speak, but she cuts him off, telling him villains who hog screen time tend to die first. She warns him about 2 troublesome intruders they faced earlier and is confident they'll return. So, she's already laid out traps, convinced her plan is foolproof. Soon after, Merlin and the group reach the cave. Without thinking, Henry the Brave charges straight in and triggers a flame barrier, with Merlin casually getting caught in it too, because of course he didn't care enough to dodge. Confident they've won, the Goblin Mage steps out with her squad, demanding everyone surrender or get roasted. Mr. Chunky's courage evaporates instantly, and he begs Merlin to save them. Merlin sighs and walks through the flame barrier like it's a curtain of warm mist. The goblins start clapping for the mage, cheering her on. She's all proud of herself, until Merlin joins in on the celebration with an unsettling grin and appears behind her like a final boss, asking, "What's so funny?" The mage flips out. How the heck did this guy survive? She asks who he is, and that simple, "Who are you?" sends Merlin spiraling into an identity crisis. Is he the Demon Lord? A waiter? A freeloader? A stripper? He can't say Demon Lord. Imagine the PR disaster if word got out that the ruler of demons was moonlighting as a waiter in some backwater town. So instead, he flashes a peace sign and introduces himself as Daisy, the friendly tavern waiter. Shockingly, his riz doesn't charm the lady, but the male goblins go feral. Miss Mage nearly pukes and instantly gets serious again, not sensing any strong battle aura from Merlin. She assumes he's just a lucky weakling. She draws her weapon, ready to end him, but Merlin walks up to her, grabs her hand gently, and tells her not to waste their lives. Just hand over Martha. His sparkling anime eyes almost seduce the mage. Almost. She snaps out of it and launches her ultimate fire spell at him. But not even a thread of Merlin's clothes gets burned. He sneezes, casually, and that one sneeze reflects the fire spell right back at the goblins, wiping them out like a cheat code. Then, as the mage stumbles in shock, Merlin lightly taps her face, sending her flying into the mountains at the speed of light. With the mage down, all her traps are disabled, and Merlin's group is free. As he walks into the cave, the townsfolk stare at his back and start to wonder, is he the vigilante Nightblade they've seen on TV? Meanwhile, 2 rookie goblins are left guarding the hostages, but suddenly, the lights go out. Alice appears, ready for action. She frees everyone, clears a path by demolishing the goblins in her way, and gets them all to safety. But one big problem remains: the Goblin King. He finally gets up from his throne after who knows how many years, and despite his age, Alice senses his power. She calls it he's at least holy tier, and she, as an elite tier mage, stands zero chance. Back on Merlin's side, he's struggling, not in battle, but with the Goblin Cave's weirdly designed corridors. Turns out, the ruler of Pride doesn't have enough brain cells to navigate a maze without getting lost. Who could have guessed? Alice is still as useless as ever, and despite her efforts, she gets caught by the Goblin King, who literally grabs her and tries to squeeze the life out of her. He finds her pain amusing, so he doesn't kill her, wanting instead to torment her slowly. This becomes his mistake, as Alice uses the smallest opportunity to escape his grasp and strikes him with her ultimate move, Absolute Zero, landing 3 consecutive deadly hits, followed by an ice spike piercing through his stomach. However, to her shock, the Goblin King heals himself instantly. Taking the battle seriously, he transforms into a Giga Chad with 6-pack abs and completely overwhelms her, shattering her shield and hitting her with a bone-crushing punch. Meanwhile, the hostages, now on the run, bump into Merlin, who finally finds Martha. Without missing a beat, he asks her to pay him for this field job. She doesn't have time to argue as the goblins are charging toward them, so she grabs Merlin's hand and drags him along. But Merlin isn't a fan of high-speed getaways. He's more of a slow, calm-minded walker, so he deals with the problem by slashing down all the goblins in one clean strike, making Martha and the others realize that he's actually a great warrior. The adventurer girl, who was the first one caught and is technically the reason this whole mess started, begs Merlin to save Alice, who stayed behind to cover their escape. Merlin's Red Devil side tells him that saving the half-baked hero has nothing to do with him, especially considering she tried to stab him the last time they met. But his nicer Blue Devil side reminds him that they still need Alice to get into the Adventurers Guild. Martha also jumps in, promising to triple his salary if he saves Alice. This offends Merlin, who tells her he's not a money-hungry guy. Bro, you literally only care about money, you hypocritical brokey. The adventurer girl tells Merlin that Alice is inside the Goblin King's hall, which is filled with gold coins, and that the king is a holy tier. That catches Merlin's attention. He needs both money and strong enemies to survive. Without hesitation, dashes inside, while the ladies left behind assume that this sacrificial hero went in there despite the dangers to save his beloved Alice. Merlin charges down the long path inside the cave, breaks through the giant gate, and enters the hall to save the useless hero. The Goblin King, like a true villain, starts a long speech upon seeing Merlin, but Merlin completely ignores him and locks eyes on the pile of treasure behind him. Bro just hit the jackpot. He literally moves the Goblin King aside to claim the treasure for himself. The Goblin King is confused. This guy can't just walk in and claim all the loot he worked so hard to steal. The irony. Merlin tells him to shut up, then casually slices off the Goblin King's left hand and rescues Alice. Seeing Alice in such a miserable state does hurt him a little. He can't bring her back like this. If Martha sees her condition, she might cut his pay for incompetent delivery. Even in pain, Alice worries about the others. Once Merlin assures her they're safe, she finally passes out. Merlin gently lays her down, then turns his attention to the regenerating king. The Goblin King's confidence bores Merlin. He's literally one strike man. Still, he doesn't draw his sword yet. Instead, he lets the Goblin King attack first, blocking every strike effortlessly without even looking. When the Goblin King demands to know who he is, Merlin replies that someone of his caliber doesn't deserve to know. So, he just introduces himself by his stage name, Daisy. Facing mockery, the Goblin King has no choice but to transform into his final form and prepares to unleash his ultimate technique. Merlin lets him, if it's strong enough. Maybe it'll extend his lifespan by 15 to 20 days. Before launching the attack, the Goblin King offers Merlin one last chance. Surrender and become his subordinate. Merlin laughs hysterically at the proposition, then apologizes for not being able to control his laughter. He delivers a dramatic speech about how there's no one in the world who can match his aura and riz, claiming that even gods can't withstand a fraction of his glorious radiance. He adds that the Goblin King isn't even worthy of being food for his pet dragon. That seals the deal. The Goblin King launches his ultimate move, but not at Merlin. He aims it at Alice. Merlin, unfazed, blocks the attack barehanded and calls the Goblin King a fraud for even claiming to be holy tier. Even his sister Lilith is stronger than this. Tired of the nonsense, Merlin finally draws his sword, and the Goblin King instantly realizes he's dealing with the ruler of pride. That legendary vortex sword can only be wielded by him. Before the Goblin King can beg for mercy, Merlin reduces him to dust, and although he was weak, Merlin still gains some health for defeating a holy tier. His strike blasts the statue behind the throne, revealing even more gold coins. The sight sends Merlin into a blissful daydream. He imagines himself reaching the peak of his life, but his strike was a bit too powerful. The entire mountain above the cave begins to collapse. Now he has two choices: save Alice or take the treasure. This time, the blue, more intellectual devil suggests he take the treasure, but the red devil advises saving Alice. She can help him join the Adventurers Guild, which means more money and more strong enemies. Thinking about long-term profit and his promise to Martha, Merlin carries Alice out of the cave. Shedding tears for the mountain of gold coins he leaves behind. Once outside, Henry is the first to praise Merlin, thanking him for rescuing Alice, but the tears won't stop. Martha assumes he's crying over Alice, who's gravely injured. But no, these tears aren't for the half-baked hero. They're for the treasure he just lost. Later at the tavern, Merlin sits beside an unconscious Alice, wondering if he should use his healing powers to cure her wounds. He finds even this little bit of work bothersome and grumbles to himself that after giving up a cave full of gold coins, he now has to do even more just to request her again to recommend him as an adventurer. But if anything happens to her, all of his plans will go to waste. So he decides to do it. But first, he needs to remove her clothes to do so. As he starts undressing her, Martha and her son conveniently enter the room at that very moment, catching him red-handed. They give him privacy, already assuming that he and Alice are a couple, and Merlin, not realizing that, casually continues what he was doing. After removing all of her armor, he leans in with a charming expression, as if he's about to kiss her. But just as their lips are about to touch, he moves away and starts spitting everywhere on her body. As disgusting as it may be, Merlin's saliva has healing properties that only work on the opposite sex. In no time, he covers the entire room in his spit bubbles, curing all of Alice's injuries. It's one of Merlin's ultimate techniques, so he doesn't plan on doing a freebie like this again anytime soon. Meanwhile, with her injuries cured, Alice has a literal dream where she meets Nightblade and mutters in her sleep that he's so handsome and that she loves him the most. Merlin realizes that his technique not only heals people, but also gives them weird dreams. In any case, he doesn't sleep that night and stays in her room to protect her from any further harm. The next morning, Alice wakes up to find Merlin already gone. She's greeted by the adventurer girl, who tells her everything that happened after she got knocked out by the Goblin King. Alice can't believe Merlin saved her life and goes into shock. The adventurer girl tells her not to hold any grudges, because in love, fights happen. Alice insists there's an obvious misunderstanding and that they're mortal enemies only, but nobody takes her seriously. In any case, the adventurers group is now leaving the town with their guild commission coming to an end. Before they leave, they thank Alice for all she's done for them. Just before departing, the adventurer girl teases Alice about what happened with Merlin the entire night, saying she was in the next room and heard them laughing and giggling all night. Although that was Alice talking in her sleep, she can't believe Merlin was with her the entire time while she was unconscious, and is horrified to find herself without clothes. Out in town, Merlin notices a crowd gathered where a news reporter has arrived to cover the goblin battle. The chunky man claims to be the village's savior, bragging about how he single-handedly defeated all the goblins. But the moment he sees Merlin giving him the side eye, he bolts before he gets whacked. With Mr. Chunky gone, the news reporter turns to Merlin for his take on the goblin invasion. Merlin proudly states it was nothing and that he flicked them away with a wave. The reporter then turns to the camera, marveling at how miraculously the townspeople handled the goblin invasion. She announces that she'll soon be interviewing the former 233rd hero, Alice, while explaining Alice's streak of bad luck getting captured by the Goblin King after previously being taken by the Demon King and the Pirate King. Merlin returns to the tavern and learns from Martha that Alice is looking for him, so he heads to her room, assuming she wants to shower him with gratitude for saving her life again. The mere thought of Alice kneeling and bowing makes him giggle. He quickly enters the room, only to be attacked by her. He can't believe she's acting crazy again. She doesn't say a word, just keeps calling him a nasty pervert, a demon, a villain, and swings her sword frantically. Merlin pins her to the wall and demands to know why she's being so aggressive. He tells her she should be thanking him and repaying him for saving her life again, but Alice doesn't care. She accuses him of taking advantage of her while she was unconscious and vulnerable. This is obviously a misunderstanding. Merlin explains that he only took off her clothes to spit all over her body to heal her, but Alice doesn't believe it. She demands to know why the adventurer girl heard funny noises all night coming from their room. Merlin reveals the truth. Alice was deep in her dreams, shouting stuff like, "Oh, I love you," and "You so handsome," completely embarrassing her. With Alice finally believing him, Merlin scolds her for being so hostile and calls her ungrateful. She reluctantly forces herself to thank him, but Merlin pretends not to hear and asks her to say it again. So she screams at him, just the usual. He still refuses to accept, reminding her he gave up an entire cave of gold coins for her sake. So now she has to repay his great kindness by recommending him as an adventurer. Alice agrees, and so Merlin quits his job, bidding farewell to his fangirls and fan aunties. He also says goodbye to Martha and Henry, telling the boy to take good care of his mom now that he won't be around to protect. With everything settled, Merlin and Alice hop onto the carriage. Merlin comments on how absurd it is that everyone mistook them for a couple. Alice, for once, agrees, adding that she would never date a stripper like him. Offended, Merlin snaps back, and just like that, the lovers' quarrel begins for the long journey ahead. Meanwhile, the Goblin Mage, who somehow survived, learns of the Goblin King's death and decides to migrate south with the rest of her army to stay as far away from Merlin as possible. But just then, a mysterious woman appears from the rubble. She reveals that she's taken the third key of the Hell Legion from the treasure room, but she can't afford to leave any witnesses, so she eliminates the Goblin Mage and the rest of the goblins on the spot. Several hours later, Merlin and Alice arrive in front of the Adventurers Guild. Merlin immediately rushes to the guild notice board, looking for some juicy quests to make money, but Alice drags him to the guild receptionist, Lucia, and introduces him. Lucia asks if Merlin is her boyfriend, triggering Alice's short temper to the point she betrays Merlin on the spot, exposing him as the wanted freeloader of the South and demands the 5,000 coin bounty for his capture. Alice clarifies her intention, saying that a person with a criminal record cannot be an adventurer, so she tells the receptionist, Lucia, that Merlin must pay off his debts to get rid of his criminal record, and by becoming an adventurer under Alice's surveillance, repay it through working. Lucia allows it, but since Alice found a loophole in the bounty quest, she only gives her 50 gold coins instead of 5,000. Lucia then turns to Merlin, telling him how much Alice cares for him to have sacrificed so much for him. Merlin cringes to the point he wants to turn himself in, but Alice doesn't let him. He gets mad at her for exposing him, and once again blames her for costing him an entire cave of goblin treasure. While these two get into the lovers' quarrel again, Lucia prepares a rank evaluation for Merlin, and Merlin wonders what rank the strongest Demon King will get. In this world, the low-level warriors are ranked as Iron Adventurers, and it goes to Silver rank, Golden rank, and all the way up to Mithril rank for Holy Tier warriors. Merlin can't believe that worthless Holy Tiers get the highest rank and demands Lucia to come up with something superior, as he claims to be deserving of something better. She thinks he's joking around, but still tells him about the legendary Amethyst rank that only a hero with immense power can get. Merlin becomes happy and tells Lucia to go ahead and register him as Amethyst already without taking the test. Lucia still assumes that this guy is just joking around and doesn't take him seriously at all. A red-haired guy named Hobbs, who knows Alice, was listening to their conversation from behind and comes forward to see who she has brought with her. Another guy named Arnold enters the guild and is left absolutely heartbroken upon learning that Alice has another guy hanging around with her. He immediately goes down on his knees, asking her to marry him, recalling how she has rejected him several times before, even though he is the son of a count. Alice makes it clear to her fanboy that she is single and is not dating Merlin or anything. And with that cleared up, Arnold steps up before Merlin can seize Alice from him, challenging Merlin to a duel right here and now. The winner gets the right to date Alice. Merlin couldn't care less because he doesn't want to be anywhere near this half-baked ex-hero, so he forfeits before the duel, giving Arnold the win. But Arnold doesn't take it. Instead, he thinks Merlin is mocking him. In any case, as the son of the Count, he can't accept this commoner's charity. Like a sentimentalist from the 1800s, he states that he will save Alice from that evil Merlin. But Alice couldn't care less about this entire BS and punches Arnold in the face, telling him to get back to reality. But Arnold, ignoring Alice's words, draws his sword and charges at Merlin, quite nonchalantly flicks him away with a finger, making him crash headfirst into the roof. Alice reprimands Merlin for hitting Arnold too hard, but at the same time thanks him since she kinda enjoyed it. In any case, Merlin's short display of strength makes him the center of attention at the guild, leaving everyone, including Hobbs, wondering if he's as strong as an elite tier. Merlin takes this comment as an absolute insult and is about to draw his vortex sword, asking Hobbs who he thinks is as useless as an elite tier. Alice calms Merlin down before he wrecks the entire city, assuring him that Hobbs was trying to compliment him because elite tiers are very rare in this guild. Merlin lets it go, but declares that he is going to raise the guild's overall level himself. At that moment, a dark, gloomy man named Claude comes in his way, telling him to move aside. Merlin, of course, couldn't care less, but Alice quickly makes him, sensing the danger it will bring if Merlin picks a fight with this guy. She tells Merlin that she can sense how strong Claude is, and tells him not to get in trouble on his first day. They both keep staring at Claude, who takes the rank evaluation test and turns out to be a holy tier. Lucia registers Claude as a mithril adventurer, and everyone becomes excited because there's only one other holy tiered member in their guild, who is the guild master himself. Meanwhile, Merlin is not impressed. He doesn't want a weak loser to get the spotlight and steps up for his assessment, ready to make everyone bow before him after they realize how powerful he is. But much to his surprise, the crystal ball doesn't glow at all, meaning that he doesn't have any battle aura. All the guild members look down upon Merlin, stating that this loudmouth ended up being a weakling after all. But what's worse is that Lucia doesn't think Merlin has what it takes to be an adventurer. Since the crystal ball didn't glow at all, it means he doesn't have any combat power at all. Of course, the problem might be that Merlin doesn't have any magical powers, nor battle aura. And as he reveals that to Alice, she becomes shocked but is not surprised, since this guy is pretty unbeatable with his single strike attack. So, she vouches to Lucia for him, stating that Merlin is definitely strong enough to be an adventurer. But Lucia just assumes that Alice is only vouching for Merlin out of love. Merlin tries to convince Lucia, stating that even the emissaries of demons begged him to lead the Hell Legion, and he refused. But she once again assumes he's bluffing. Some of the guys in the back even laugh at Merlin, saying if there was a rank for bluffing, Merlin would definitely get Amethyst tier. Still, Merlin stands his ground, and to prove his strength, tells Lucia to bring the guildmaster, claiming he can beat him. They all assume he's just talking big like he has been since stepping foot into the guild. The former guildmaster, a holy tiered man, overhears Merlin bragging and accepts his request, joining him in the guild's battlegrounds for the duel. He brags to Merlin about defeating countless powerful warriors at this very ground, but Merlin ignores him completely and gets busy doing something more important, picking boogers out of his ears. The massive disrespect makes the guildmaster furious. He tells Merlin to go all out, and if he can get him to move an inch from his ground, he will give him the win, allowing him to register as an adventurer. Merlin, getting the permission to go all out, strikes with his vortex sword, destroying the entire arena. Meanwhile, Alice hopes that Merlin doesn't hurt the Guildmaster too much, and seconds later gets hit with an explosion from Merlin's strike that wrecks even the outside streets of the guild. But the adventurers assume it was their Guildmaster who caused this damage to show Merlin his place. However, Merlin steps out unscathed and promises Alice that he didn't hurt the Guildmaster because he needs him to vouch for his strength. Shortly after, the Guildmaster comes out, still reflecting on life. He is shaking badly and asks Lucia to bring him a new set of clothes as he has wetted his pants. In any case, Merlin gets to be registered as an Iron Adventurer, even though he just destroyed the strongest man of this guild. But Alice tells him to be happy since he is the only exception who got to become an adventurer even after failing the evaluation test. Merlin asks Alice what they should do now and assigns Alice in charge of picking their adventurer missions, saying he will alone handle holy tier enemies while she does the minor guild commissions. He wants to start with doing 100 commissions a month and, doing a very bad calculation, states that they will earn tens of millions of gold every month. He dreams of monopolizing the entire adventurer industry and tells Alice that he will generously give her 10% of their profit. However, Alice is not pleased at all and tells Merlin to just get lost. Merlin does leave, cursing Alice repeatedly for not learning her place after all this time. In any case, he is hungry but doesn't have enough money to pay for food. Moreover, he doesn't have a place to stay the night. So, he ends up crashing into Alice's house while she is in the shower. And when Alice steps out hearing footsteps, she accidentally drops her bathrobe, leading to an awkward interaction. Later, Merlin gracefully sits on her sofa, eating her food, not explaining to her at all why he's here. She asks if he came here to spy on her, and in reply, he tells her that she has nothing worth spying on, LOL. She keeps disturbing his peace with her questions, so he tries to flatter her, saying he just wants to help out a friend by moving into her place to protect her safety, which just comes with a tiny bit of a protection fee, 1,000 gold per month. Alice immediately throws him out of her house though, and Merlin reminds her how much he has done for her and calls her out for acting heartlessly when he is the one in trouble. He tells her he's got nowhere to go and begs her to open the door. His pleas gather a crowd who pity him and wonder if the worthless hero has dumped this poor guy after using him. Hearing the commotion, Alice quickly gets Merlin back inside before he ruins the little image she has left. She gets her sword and attacks Merlin for trying to ruin her image, but he just dodges everything on his way to the second floor, and, claiming her bedroom, shamelessly tells her that he will be living here from now on, and since they are good friends, will not charge her any protection fee. She keeps trying to attack him and conveniently lands on top of him on the bed, and Merlin asks her if she wants to sleep in the same bed as him. Before she can answer though, he wraps her inside a rug, puts her to sleep with the gentlest flick of his fingers, and gets a good night's rest himself. The next day, Alice goes to the guild and vents out her anger on Merlin, telling both Lucia and Hobbs that Merlin moved into her place, made her sleep on the floor, and now her back's hurting like hell. However, Hobbs thinks Alice is the problem here because of her short temper and tells her to calm down, which just triggers her short temper even more. Merlin comes to the guild just after waking up and proudly tells Lucia, Hobbs, and Alice's fanboy Arnold that they are now living together, making everyone think that these two have already done the ABCs of love. But Arnold is still fine if Alice has gone past the third base with Merlin and still wants to fight for his love. He wants another duel with Merlin, saying it would be a best of 3, but the duel wouldn't be a sword duel. It would be more like an adventurer duel where the adventurer who scores the most will win. Arnold brings out an A-grade guild commission that requires the adventurer to kill a massive number of undead appearing in Denbighshire. Merlin couldn't care less about the duel, but after learning that the guild commission reward is at 5,000 gold, he accepts the challenge and tells Lucia that he wants to take the commission. However, Lucia states that as an iron rank, he cannot take any commissions alone. So Merlin proposes to Alice that they team up, but Alice doesn't want to be anywhere near him. Arnold takes this opportunity to recruit Alice into his team, telling her that he's already hired Claude, the holy tiered adventurer, by spending a fortune and promises her if she joins them, they will get the entire 5,000 gold reward. But Merlin states that if Alice teams up with him, she will get a better deal, which is 10% instead of Arnold's equal three-way split of the earning. So Alice teams up with Arnold just to mess with Merlin, leaving him wondering where he will find someone to team up with. He ends up choosing the drunk Hobbs and literally kidnaps him. When Hobbs becomes sober and is finally conscious, he finds himself in a carriage with Merlin already on their way to Denbighshire. Hobbs demands an explanation, and Merlin claims that Hobbs begged him to take him on this dangerous mission, which is true, and he was so drunk that he didn't know what he was getting himself into. In any case, Hobbs wants to go back because he's only a low-tier mage while Merlin has no magic power, but Merlin assures Hobbs that they'll be fine, as he has experience dealing with garbage monsters like undead. At that moment, the Rose Knights come up to them, and they too are on their way to Denbighshire. However, Hobbs says that the road is too narrow and advises the Knights to walk the rest of the way. However, the Knight states that isn't possible because they are escorting the Rose Duke's daughter, who cannot walk. Merlin, nonchalantly and with pure disrespect, asks the Knight if the Duke's daughter is crippled or something. The leading Knight, Kyle, tries to whip Merlin as a punishment for disrespecting the Duke's daughter, but Merlin catches the whip and throws the Knight to the ground for daring to pick a fight with him. The other Knights serving the Duke draw their swords immediately, and Kyle gets up too and draws his sword. Merlin doesn't want their worthless existence to be left in the dust, so he offers them a chance to apologize to him if they want to live. As both parties are about to get into a fight, a horde of burning rhinos comes in their direction straight toward the carriage, so the Knights come in front of the carriage to protect their lady, while in the meantime, Hobbs tries to crawl away from this life-threatening situation. But Merlin stays, finding it strange that these wild beasts are running in a stampede. He suspects that they must have been running away from something in Denbighshire that has frightened them. In any case, Merlin steps up to save the Knights from getting trampled and deal with the stampede himself. That's it for the first part of this series. If you enjoyed this anime, rate it out of 10. Personally, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10 for how ridiculously funny it is. If you want the next part, let us know down below, and we'll bring it to you at the speed of light. Thanks for watching. Kyle and his fellow knights are completely stunned by Merlin's powers. As they watch in disbelief, the horde of burning rhinos charges toward them, only to veer off at the last second to avoid getting in Merlin's way. But why? Kyle is confused, since all this time he believed demon beasts never stop charging, even in dangerous situations. Hobbs demands Merlin explain what just happened, and Merlin casually tells him that the burning rhinos are demons, and demons instinctively know to avoid someone superior. Hobbs thinks Merlin is just spouting nonsense again, and suspects that Merlin probably used some kind of beast repellent powder to redirect the rhinos. Merlin, offended that Hobbs doesn't believe him, gives up on explaining further and starts heading back to his carriage. But Kyle stops him, leaving Merlin wondering if this loser still wants a duel, even after witnessing his powers. However, Kyle only wants to thank Merlin, expressing his gratitude for saving everyone's lives, especially Lady Cecilia, the Rose Duke's daughter, whom they're currently escorting. Kyle reluctantly brings up the insults Merlin threw earlier, but Cecilia interrupts and tells him not to engage in any more frivolous arguments. She then approaches Merlin and is shocked to see his adventurer badge, asking if he's really ranked iron. Regardless, she wants to hire him as one of her personal knights and offers to pay him 10,000 gold coins. Hobbs instantly agrees to be her knight, but she never offered him the job. Cecilia makes it clear that a loser like Hobbs isn't even worth 5 gold coins. Normally, Merlin would kill for that kind of money, but not today. Today, he wants Cecilia to offer his actual worth. He mockingly tells her that a mortal like her probably can't afford a godly man like him. Still, Merlin offers a deal. He'll accept if Cecilia agrees to clear all the debts he owes to his previous employers, aka the other demon kings. As he casually drops that he owes 66 trillion gold coins, Cecilia and Kyle leave quietly without giving him a reply. Realizing he might have just cost himself a solid job, Merlin starts screaming after them, begging them to negotiate, even offering to knock 5 million gold off the total. Cecilia shifts back to the main topic, telling Kyle to pick up the pace. They have to reach Denbisher's underground crypt before either Merlin's or Arnold's team does. She reveals that she knows Arnold and considers him a rival. That's why she's taken the same mission. She wants to impress her father by completing it first. If Arnold or Merlin beat her to it, her entire plan will be ruined. Speaking of Arnold, he's having the time of his life sharing the same ride as the love of his life, Alice. However, Alice is not enjoying the experience at all. She yells at the driver to speed up the carriage, while Arnold tries to calm her down, assuring her that with the greatest adventurer Claude on their team, they're destined to win. And when they do, he'll earn the right to be in a relationship with her. Alice immediately shoves Arnold away, making it very clear she's not interested, stating that the only man in her heart is the strongest warrior in existence, Nightblade. Claude asks who this self-proclaimed strongest warrior is. After hearing all of Nightblade's supposed feats, Claude still isn't impressed, saying that all the enemies Nightblade has faced are just weaklings. According to him, the true strongest are the 4 heroes of the previous empire. The first of those heroes is the dragon assassin Corona, who we may have seen earlier collecting something from the rubble beneath the goblin hideout. Apparently, whoever she targets never survives, and she once single-handedly defeated 7 holy tears in a single night. The next 2 are Zoe and Joey, the twin sword saints, and finally, Bernard, a dragon slayer and leader of the 4 heroes, who's never lost a fight in his life. Even though Claude doesn't know how strong Nightblade really is, he's certain that compared to the 4 great heroes, Nightblade would look like a complete clown. Arnold thinks all of this is irrelevant, since those heroes lived centuries ago. Alice, on the other hand, is about to lose her mind. She demands that Claude take back his words, and is just about to go on a screaming spree when, luckily for Claude, a horde of burning rhinos charges their way, redirecting everyone's attention. Knowing the rhinos never stop, the only option is to fight. Claude steps up and, with a single strike, wipes them all out. Maybe he is going to give Merlin a run for his money when they inevitably face off. Back to Merlin and Hobbs. They're the first to reach the crypt and set up camp. Merlin, being the ladies' man that he is, gets drunk with 2 women who want to share him equally tonight. When Alice finally arrives, only to get verbally slapped by Merlin. He tells her she's slow as hell, since both his team and Cecilia's team arrived nearly 12 hours ago. Alice smacks him on the head, calling him a carefree clown who still isn't taking things seriously, even when this mission might determine her future dating life. The 2 ladies ask Merlin who this loudmouth is, and Hobbs casually says that Alice is Merlin's girlfriend. With that, the women leave, not wanting to get involved with a man who's already in a relationship. Alice starts arguing with Merlin, reminding him of the bet he made with Arnold. Speaking of Arnold, he arrives soon after and proudly declares that he's going to win this challenge using the power of money, since he has the strongest adventurer, Claude, by his side. Arnold then tries to provoke Merlin by saying that once the mission is done, he'll take Alice too. Merlin makes it clear that he doesn't give 2 shits about the half-baked hero. He's only here for the 5,000 gold reward. Alice is absolutely done with all of this and walks off. Once she's gone, Arnold decides to be fair and shares a crucial piece of information with Merlin. According to him, the undead appeared after a group of grave robbers tried to loot the tomb of the previous kingdom's chancellor, disturbing his spirit. The chancellor was a summoner mage and is responsible for raising the undead skeleton army now terrorizing this area. Hobbs is terrified, but Merlin obviously still considers this mission child's play. Meanwhile, Alice is out wandering in the forest like an idiot when she spots Claude walking alone. Curious, she quietly sneaks behind him to see what he's doing and finds him opening a magic portal to speak with someone addressed as His Majesty. Shockingly, that man refers to Claude as Bernard, implying that Claude is actually one of the 4 legendary heroes of the past. Alice is shaken by this revelation, and as she tries to step back, she accidentally steps on a branch, revealing her location. Claude brings out his sword, prepared to eliminate anyone who might have discovered his secret. As he comes around the giant rock where Alice is hiding, she pretends to be drunk and acts all normal and messy, as if she just happened to come here by coincidence and didn't hear a thing. She tells Claude to come back with her since it's getting late, and sneakily activates a spell while trying to drag him along. As Claude doesn't move a muscle, she walks away from the scene, still pretending she's tipsy. After getting to a safe distance, she reveals that the spell she used is an eavesdropping spell, giving her the ability to listen in on Claude. Claude continues his conversation with the man on the other side, the prince of the fallen previous empire. The prince asks Claude about the progress of their mission, and Claude reveals his plan to use the adventurers he's joined, calling them foolish, in order to reach Chancellor Ian's tomb, who possesses something they need to restore their lost empire, a key. Claude vows to eliminate Ian, stating that he betrayed them 400 years ago by going into hiding when the empire needed him the most. The prince closes the portal, leaving all responsibility to Claude, trusting that he, the leader of the four heroes, will do whatever is necessary to achieve their goal. Alice knows she has to do something, but how can she? Claude is way too strong. She wonders if she should ask for Merlin's help, but then realizes that if she does, Merlin will probably instantly slander her and not take it seriously at all. So she drops the idea, deciding to deal with the issue herself, and begins to follow Claude. Meanwhile, Cecilia and her knights are already on their way to the tomb of the undead mage Ian. Unlike the other groups who've decided to carry out the mission tomorrow morning, Kyle advises her that they too should rest, but Cecilia refuses, as she wants to be the only one completing the mission. Claude teleports there, and upon seeing Cecilia's group, calls them a bunch of fools for thinking they can enter the tomb personally crafted by the strongest undead mage. He's certain they'll get lost inside, as the tomb is a literal maze. But he couldn't care less and continues on to carry out his own mission. Alice, eavesdropping on Claude's self-monologue, learns that the tomb is a maze, so she figures she needs to stick close to Claude, otherwise she'll get lost too. On the other hand, when Arnold wakes up in the morning, he panics after not finding his precious Alice anywhere near camp. His tiniest doubt tells him she spent the night with Merlin, so he checks Merlin's tent, finding him cuddling in his sleep with a pet dragon. Bro freaks out seeing this spectacle, but he's also relieved that Alice isn't there. Merlin's sleep is interrupted because of Arnold, and he is pissed. He demands Arnold explain his actions, or face the consequences for disturbing the strongest demon lord. Arnold explains that Alice has gone missing, but Merlin couldn't care less about the half-baked hero, and tells Arnold that Alice is probably hiding somewhere to escape from Arnold's annoying existence. But Arnold thinks it's something else, because Claude is missing too. Hobbs wakes up and mentions, half asleep, that he saw both of them heading into the forest late at night, which breaks overly dramatic Arnold's heart. He thinks his precious Alice has already switched lovers and eloped with Claude, since he's the current strongest adventurer among the three. Hobbs, on the other hand, thinks realistically and suspects that both Alice and Claude went to complete the quest, and hearing that, Merlin gets pumped up, since he can't afford to lose 5,000 gold coins. So, he takes off immediately, leaving his teammate Hobbs with Arnold to rot behind. Meanwhile, Claude is already on the second floor and is destroying every monster in his path, making it super easy for Alice to keep following him in secret. He finds all of the secret passages, which leaves Alice wondering how this guy is so familiar with the maze. One secret passageway literally leads to the tomb of the undead Chancellor, and once inside, Claude menacingly tells Ian to come out from his grave. Ian recognizes Claude as Bernard and realizes that he's been revived. Yeah, we should also switch the name, I guess. Bernard reveals that it's not only him who was revived, but also the other three heroes by the prince of their fallen empire. Since it's been 400 years, Ian realizes that the prince must still be alive using dark magic and must have used magic from the abyss to revive the four heroes. Ian was apparently always against the prince using dark magic, thinking it would only lead to everyone's ruin, and that's why he stepped aside. But that's beside the point. He asks why Bernard is here, and Bernard explains that the prince would like him to help them restore their lost empire. However, Ian refuses to do so, stating he's an undead whose sole purpose is to study spells, but nothing else. In that case, Bernard asks him to hand over the key he guards. Ian instantly refuses, reminding Bernard that it was the prince who ignored Ian's warning and made a pact with a demon, which led to their empire's ruin. But Bernard doesn't care. He draws his sword to take the key forcefully and fights the strongest mage in history. Alice, meanwhile, is scared shitless, and as she quivers in fear, she realizes that perhaps she shouldn't have come here. At the same time, Merlin is making his way through the first floor while casually slaying all of the monsters. We already know how his brain never functions, so of course he alone can't get through this maze. As he keeps walking in circles, he starts to lose his mind, so he decides to brute force his way through and punches a hole in the ground, assuming the boss of the tomb is somewhere below, leading to the second floor. Cecilia's team is also on the second floor, and her knights are kinda weak, having a tough time dealing with the undead. Out of nowhere, two strong undead monsters appear, and before they can do anything, they dash ahead and stab Kyle in the chest. Kyle begs his lady to abandon them and run, but how can she? In this desperate moment, she turns to the goddess of light, with tears in her eyes, begging her to save them, but it's the god of death who descends there to save the day. Cecilia asks Merlin how he, a supposed weak iron adventurer, entered the dangerous floor 2, and Merlin proudly explains his big brain play, that he actually punched his way through the floor, leaving Cecilia impressed. In any case, Cecilia requests Merlin to save her and Kyle, who can't fight anymore, but Merlin makes it clear that helping her doesn't gain him anything, and he's only here for the sweet, sweet pile of gold. Still, Cecilia gets on her knees, begging Merlin to save them, and even offers to pay him, which should have been the first thing she said, as Merlin instantly agrees. But he wants the 66 trillion, not 1 penny less. Cecilia, of course, doesn't have that much money, so she offers her body to Merlin. She's prepared to do anything to save her dear knight Kyle. Regardless, Merlin is creeped out, as he's not interested in any of that stuff. Since his image is now at stake, he decides to only take 10,000 gold for saving them, and throws them both high against the wall, making them stuck there, stating they will be safe from the undeads. With that done, he ditches them and heads for the tomb, where Bernard is having an all-out fight with Ian. This is a battle of auras between the two holy tiers, and Ian summons a mighty undead to gain the upper hand. As Bernard gets ready for a fierce battle, Merlin makes his way in, interrupting the fight. Alice has never been this happy to see Merlin, actually. This is the first time she's happy seeing his face. Anyway, Merlin is glad that the undead mage is still alive, which means he can get the credit if he subjugates him. But first, Merlin asks Bernard where Alice is, since he's heard she came here with him. Ian feels disrespected that this unknown guy just barged into his resting place, so he attacks Merlin with one of his strongest spells. But Merlin casually flicks the magic attack away. Since Merlin literally punched his way here as well, Bernard and Ian realize that Merlin must be super strong, at least holy tier strong. So both of them decide to team up to deal with this guy before continuing their own fight. Ian sends his undead toward Merlin, but Merlin nonchalantly dodges all of the attacks. With the gentlest swing of his unsheathed sword, he also sends Bernard crashing away. Bernard, Ian, and the undead attack Merlin at once, but he defends effortlessly. Alice knows Merlin is strong, but she still thinks the fight is unfair. But she knows she's useless, and even if she does come out to help, Merlin will probably refuse to fight alongside her and call her all sorts of names, like a useless, half-baked hero, and that's why she stays hidden. Merlin decides to put an end to this battle and draws his sword, putting an end to Ian's summoned monster and its master Ian, who is reduced to nothing, leaving behind the key he was guarding. Bernard realizes that he cannot beat Merlin, so he requests Merlin to hand over the key, promising to repay his debt one day. But Merlin has already been conned in the past, so he tells Bernard to pay him with real money if he wants the key. So, Bernard offers Merlin 200,000 gold coins in exchange for the key. But Alice interrupts, and as expected, Merlin doesn't wait a second to slander her, accusing her of only showing up to take the bounty money now that the hard part's done. Alice would like to argue with Merlin, but this is not the time. She first asks Merlin why he's here, and he replies that he's come because he has to win. And she immediately assumes that Bro wants to win to get the right to date her, and starts giggling. Merlin cringes hard, calling Alice a dumb idiot for thinking he would want to date her. Of course, he's here for the money, not for the half-baked hero. As they are about to fight, Bernard calls for their attention, telling both of them that they shouldn't be showing off their relationship in front of a man who's been single for the past 400 years. But both Merlin and Alice in unison make it clear that they are not in a relationship. Anyway, the point is, Alice doesn't want Merlin to give the key to Bernard, telling Merlin that Bernard is a 400-year-old walking corpse who is plotting to restore the previous empire with that key using some dark power. Now that Bernard's secret is out, Bernard regrets letting Alice live back in the forest and attacks her to deal with her first. But Merlin steps in, defending Alice, stating that if Alice dies, he won't have a place to live since he's staying at her place. In any case, Merlin teaches Bernard basic math, telling him that he's already lost in a battle where all three of them were fighting Merlin, so it's clear he can't win against Merlin in a 1 versus 1. But Bernard claims he was simply holding back, and now he goes all out, unleashing a forbidden technique called Rogue's Sacrifice to gain 100 times his original strength in exchange for his own life force. Now, in his final form, he laughs, thinking Merlin will fall into despair. But Merlin isn't impressed at all. He claps for Bernard in the most unenthusiastic way and tells him to go ahead and show what he's got. Bernard attacks Merlin with his strength multiplied 100 times, but Merlin still effortlessly defends, and with one slash, defeats Bernard. In his dying moments, Bernard looks at the sword, and seeing that it's the vortex, he realizes that Merlin is the infamous Demon Lord, the ruler of pride, known to be the strongest. As he's reduced to dust, Merlin is kind of disappointed, since he could have gotten 200,000 gold for the key. He decides to hold on to the key, thinking its worth may be more than it seems. But Alice then states that they should turn the key over to the kingdom. Merlin calls Alice naive, reminding her that she owes millions and will never be able to repay it unless she finds a room full of treasure, which this key might lead to. So, Alice agrees, telling Merlin to give her a 50% share when they find the treasure room in the future. But Merlin only promises to give her 10. As they walk out, Merlin feels like he's forgetting something, but doesn't bother using his brain cells to figure out what. What he's forgetting is rescuing Cecilia and Kyle, who are still surrounded by hundreds of undeads. Once everyone's gone from the crypt, a boy comes out from a container, relieved that the intruders are gone, and gets back to reading, indicating that he's probably Ian, since Ian mentioned that he only wants to study spells as an undead. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, Arnold and Hobbs are being attacked by undeads that aren't easy to kill, but then suddenly, all of the undeads disappear, making them realize that someone must have defeated the undead mage. At that moment, Alice and Merlin arrive, while having a lover's quarrel, of course. The ones who stayed behind assume Alice is the one who completed the quest and go to congratulate her, offending Merlin. Alice herself gives credit to Merlin, but none of the adventurers there believe that an iron-ranked loser fought against an undead mage, let alone defeated them, and assume that Alice is only saying this because she wants to protect Merlin's pride. Soon after, the news reporter from the Kingdom Post, Bella, arrives at the scene to report what happened at Denbighshire. She decides to interview Alice, calling her the hero who saved many lives today. Merlin, still offended for not getting any credit at all, mockingly acts like a fangirl from the side, saying, "Oh my god, it's Alice, the hero who saved the day. Yo, yo, yo." Alice is so done with this BS, so she points the camera at Merlin, telling the whole world that it was Merlin who slayed the two holy tears with one strike of his sword. Merlin, at this point, no longer bothers with the credit, claiming he's already used to not making the headlines back when he was at the Demon King's palace. What he would really like is some money. He vents that since the world thinks Alice is the one who completed the quest, he won't be getting any. Alice feels bad for Merlin and offers to pay him 60% of the bounty, but Merlin continues walking away. So Alice runs after him, trying to renegotiate and stop him from getting so hung up. On the other side, in a volcanic structure, the three heroes of the previous empire have gathered to mourn for their lost comrade. They are standing before their majesty, who's sitting on his throne high above them. One of the twin heroes, Zoe, while sharpening his sword, laughs at the spectacle, calling Bernard an idiot for letting a bunch of adventurers outwit him. Because of Bernard's carelessness, The key to the gate of the abyss has now fallen into the hands of a stranger. The lady hero Corona states that they shouldn't be slandering Bernard, since he was the most loyal among them all. But Zoe thinks loyalty isn't worth anything, and the only thing that matters is reviving their empire. They need worthy warriors who can do that, not loyal dogs. Joey agrees. Still, Corona finds it humiliating that Zoe is slandering the dead and gets into an argument with him. That's when the prince speaks, and using his staff, he releases a wind magic spell that forces them to shut up. Now that they're paying attention, he makes it clear that they have to take action and speed up their plan to summon the Hell Legion, because their secrets have now been exposed to the world. Since Zoe and Joey are the more problematic type, the prince tells Corona to head to Wraxham, giving her the task to retrieve the key as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Merlin is finally convinced and his mood returns to normal as he's agreed to an 80-20 split deal with Alice. They're in a carriage on their way back to the city, and Arnold demands another chance to get the right to date Alice. Merlin really doesn't care, so he tells Arnold to go ahead and date Alice. But Arnold refuses to accept charity and launches into his romantic, crappy trope again, making Alice mad enough to almost throw him out of the carriage. Hobbs worries whether the Queen will be able to handle this situation related to the previous empire's restoration, and Arnold, being a noble, tells Hobbs not to worry, since the Queen has the Bauhinia Knights, the Royal Knights, whose leaders are 12 holy tiers, known as the Thorn Paladins. The 12 Thorn Paladins are said to be the strongest in the kingdom, and the man leading them is the strongest of them all. Speaking of the Thorn Paladins, they head to the crypt and finally rescue Kyle and Cecilia from there. Merlin and the others arrive at the city when, out of nowhere, someone throws swords at them. Merlin blocks them effortlessly and demands to know why he's being attacked. It's actually a group of cloaked knights who want to have a word with Alice, and Merlin, learning that they're not after him, quickly steps back for the half-baked hero to deal with it alone. The half-baked hero suspects that these guys are also remnants of the previous empire, so she goes all out and fights them, using her ice magic and sword. Arnold asks Hobbs and Merlin if they should help Alice, but Hobbs knows he'll only hold her back as he's not that good at fighting, while Merlin is certain that the half-baked hero is much stronger than the clowns who are fighting her for no reason. As Alice forces one of the knights to reveal his identity, the knight turns out to be Chapman, a member of the Bauhinia Knights under the command of the 9th Thorn Paladin, Sir Sahadin, who's been given the task to conduct an investigation on Alice. Alice is confused. Why is she being investigated? Chapman doesn't explain and states that the investigation is already over, then leaves with his knights. Merlin comes to bother Alice, asking her if these weaklings are really supposed to be the strongest knights in this kingdom. Alice doesn't bother defending the kingdom and scolds Merlin, calling it super rude for leaving her to fight the enemies alone. Meanwhile, on their way back, Chapman tells his knights that he's certain Alice is strong, but not strong enough to defeat the 2 holy tiers all by herself. And that can only mean the reports were exaggerated, and the 4 heroes of the past aren't that strong at all. Probably just elite tier, like Alice. So he tells his knights to go report to their leaders and assure them that the Thorn Paladins don't need to be bothered for this trivial matter. Suddenly, a cloaked individual leaves a small wound behind Chapman's neck, which he doesn't even notice, and wonders what the striking pain he felt seconds ago was. Alice and Merlin get back to the Adventurers Guild to claim the bounty from Lucia, and when they get their payout, Lucia mentions that both of their debts have been deducted from the reward, revealing that their debts have now been merged because the guildmaster has apparently registered them as a married adventurer couple, prompting both Alice and Merlin to ask, "What?" This is a big mistake by Lucia, and both Merlin and Alice state that if they were married, lightning would have struck, and conveniently enough, lightning does strike above them. Hobbs and the other adventurers laugh at the spectacle, while Arnold goes into despair, finding out that his true love is already married. Alice kicks Arnold away, telling him to stop adding more drama to an already chaotic situation. She then turns to Lucia, demanding she fix their registry info, but Lucia claims that will only be possible if they present her with a divorce certificate. But to get that certificate, they will have to marry first, then apply for a divorce. Alice doesn't want to stain her life by marrying this freeloader, and Merlin can't believe she's looking down on him when she herself is the useless half-baked hero. Regardless, Lucia mentions that since their debts have already been merged, if they split, it will be equally divided, meaning Alice's 50 million debt will be half burdened onto Merlin. He's depressed, and Alice has the last laugh, stating that this is karma, since Merlin was the one who robbed her mithril armor, which resulted in her getting saddled with debt. In any case, they have to work super hard for the rest of their lives to pay their debts, but how can they? Both loathe each other. Even when they return home, they fight with their eyes and battle over who will sleep on the bed. Merlin, being the more reasonable person, states that they should take turns each day on who gets the bed, but it's Alice's house, so she doesn't think that's fair. If the bed is going to be split, she thinks the household chores should be split as well. And today, she assigns Merlin all the housework, but he refuses and goes to sleep on the couch immediately, accepting defeat. This isn't a win for Alice, though, as she really thought she was going to make Merlin clean her house and cook dinner for her. She demands Merlin to wake up, telling him that this is not how roomies should behave. But Merlin couldn't care less, and he codes it into his brain to ignore Alice's existence and keep sleeping. The next morning, Alice comes to the Adventurers Guild where Merlin is, and demands a divorce immediately, complaining that Merlin was snoring like a pig the whole night. She also complains about how she had to do all the work and had to cook dinner as well, all of which Merlin ate when she went to the bathroom. Merlin claims her food was bad, so he thinks he actually did her a favor and tells her to be grateful, to which Alice fumes with rage even more, screaming for divorce. Hobbs, an early drinker, smiles seeing the lovebirds having a cute quarrel, while on the other hand, Arnold, the freshly dumped lover, becomes drunk too and cries out of jealousy. In any case, Merlin wants to focus on paying his debts so that he can get rid of the half-baked hero from his sight and asks Lucia if she knows about any quick ways to get money. Lucia mentions SSS ranked missions, and a single job has tens of millions of gold as a reward. Merlin loves the idea of slaying super strong monsters and getting crapload amount of money for it, and asks Lucia if there are any SSS rank missions available. Lucia laughs, stating that even if there are, Merlin isn't qualified for them since he is an iron-ranked adventurer, while the minimum requirement to take such quests is mithril. Merlin wants to get promoted immediately and asks Lucia to call the guildmaster so he can get reassessed. Lucia doesn't think Merlin would be promoted at all and states that Alice has a better chance than him to be promoted. So Merlin turns to Alice, requesting her to train rigorously under him so that she can become good enough to reach mithril rank. Merlin menacingly tells Alice to be prepared to suffer and makes it clear to her that she can never slack off. They start their training by sparring, and Merlin wants to gauge Alice's attack power, so she strikes him with her sword. Merlin smacks her away, of course, while casually picking his nose boogers. After getting knocked a couple of times, Alice gives up, accusing Merlin of only beating her instead of training her. Merlin claims that before she trains, she needs to lose everything, and she thinks he wants to take her virginity, which gets her super flustered. This bee is so delusional, and Merlin is completely tired of her nonsense, and explains that what he meant is she would have to fight at death's door to push her limits even further. He proudly claims to have fought giants, sea monsters, and dragons, and Alice assumes this is how he became so strong, by fighting in life-or-death situations. But Merlin then clarifies, stating he one-shotted all of those monsters, leaving her wondering what his point is. Merlin's point is that he just wanted to brag about how special he is. But since Alice is not, her limits must be tested, and he gets ready to make her go all out, warning her that if she doesn't during his next attack, she will lose her life. So she prepares herself, creating a magical mist before attacking Merlin with a blizzard magic attack. But Merlin is immune to all magical attacks, and he easily disarms Alice. She still doesn't give up and uses her next move, Thorns of Ice, that pierce him but deal no damage because he's immune. She tries to use the thorns to close her distance to Merlin, but Merlin, with his eyes closed, grabs her sword while she's midair and moves her away, calling her as slow as a turtle. It's his turn to attack, and he brings out his sword, but uses a bit too much power, knocking her out. While she's out, Merlin looks at his hand and notices that he's gotten cut when he grabbed her sword, leaving him wondering if this sword has any special powers. If I remember correctly, at the very beginning of this show, Merlin's sister Lilith mentioned that Alice uses a holy sword, which I guess is super effective against demons. It's just that she's an effing weakling. Anyway, Hobbs comes there, and finding Alice unconscious, suspects that Merlin did something 18 plus with her, and now she's taking rest. The reason why Hobbs is here is to tell Merlin that a gorgeous red-haired lady in a purple outfit came to the Adventurers Guild looking for him. That lady is, of course, one of the 4 heroes, Corona, but Merlin doesn't know her, so he worries that someone from the demon continent has come here to collect the debts he owes. Seeing Merlin worried, Hobbs offers to take him somewhere secret to go relax. Meanwhile, Corona is patiently sitting just outside of the guild, and when Hobbs drags Merlin outside, she notices the key hanging on Merlin's neck and immediately follows him. Hobbs takes Merlin deep inside the nearby forest and heads into a secret mansion that he claims is the paradise for the men of this city. Inside is the owner of the place, Helena, who welcomes Merlin and shows him the way to the cabin. There, while Hobbs is looking at the menu, Corona, disguised as a stripper, approaches them and pole dances for them. In seconds, she entices Hobbs and puts him to sleep, and thinks Merlin's knocked out as well. So she gets close to him to take his key, but Merlin is wide awake and calls her show pretty lame, stating he's not into old hags like her. He calls her an ancient rune who's put on tons of makeup and dressed in a manner to make herself look like a teenager. Corona, humiliated, is about to attack Merlin, but just at that moment, Helena enters, telling Merlin that he has a visitor. Merlin panics and shoves Corona away from him, thinking it's Alice. Then he wonders why he panicked, because Alice isn't really his wife. Moreover, he didn't do anything with this old stripper, so why should he be scared? In any case, he follows Helena to meet the visitor, and she quietly brings him inside a secret corridor, leaving him wondering if she's luring him into some weird cult shit or something. She suddenly stops before taking off her clothes, prompting Merlin to look away like a gentleman. Helena then turns into her real form, a winged demon, and kneels down before Merlin, referring to him as her lord. Helena explains that she is a demon general working under the ruler of lust, Asmodeus, who is the 4th demon king. This makes Merlin realize that the person who wants to meet him is Asmodeus, and that is correct, as seconds later, they enter Asmodeus's chambers. It makes sense that Asmodeus opened up a nightclub since she's the ruler of lust, but Merlin asks her why in the human continent. Asmodeus explains that she's just trying to cut costs and survive. She doesn't think she's doing anything wrong, accusing Merlin of selling demon-summoning scrolls to the human continent himself. But Merlin claims to have no idea about that, which is exactly the point of the Demon Council. Asmodeus casually slaps Merlin, reminding him how the council has always told him to govern his territory properly, but he's never done so, and that's why he was fired. Hence, he fled to the human continent. In any case, now that it's been quite a long time, Merlin hopes the Demon Council has realized how important he was to them, so he asks Asmodeus if they've considered apologizing to him yet. Asmodeus, in reply, gives Merlin the shocking news that since he left and Lilith took over, his territory's performance has skyrocketed. Regardless, she mentions Merlin's debts and makes it clear that he will have to pay them with added interest once he returns. Merlin calls Asmodeus a demon for screwing him over, but she doesn't take that as an insult because she is a demon. Anyway, Merlin asks her why she called him here, and she explains that she's noticed signs of abyssal forces in this continent. She thinks Merlin will be in trouble because back when he was in his castle, he casually killed one of the envoys from the abyssal forces. So she tells him to be careful because the abyssal forces are strong, but Merlin doesn't care. He thinks that even if the Lord of the Abyss shows up, he'll still one-shot him with ease. Asmodeus hopes that doesn't happen, because if a fight between Merlin and the Lord of the Abyss breaks out, the entire world would end up getting destroyed. With their conversation coming to an end, Merlin leaves the nightclub, and Corona follows him from a distance. She wants the key, but makes it a second objective, and first wants to punish Merlin because he's called her an old hag. She attacks Merlin from behind using an assassination technique, but her daggers don't even graze Merlin's neck. He thinks a mosquito is trying to bite him, so he whacks it away, knocking Corona afar. Merlin then realizes that he actually whacked a human, and judging by the smell, realizes that the human is that stripper auntie. From a distance, he shouts at her, telling her to leave him alone since he's not interested in old hags. Corona, though, doesn't give up. Her neck's broken from that unintentional attack, and it makes her realize that Merlin isn't an iron adventurer. He's someone super strong, but still, she thinks she's going to win if she uses her trump card. Merlin keeps walking at the slowest speed in the forest when Alice, out of nowhere, attacks him. She scolds him for ditching her after saying he was going to train her. This isn't normal. It's super rude to her, and she thinks he should apologize immediately. In any case, she demands Merlin explain where he went off to this late at night, and Merlin, for some reason acting like a cheating husband, claims he just went out for a walk. Alice knows Merlin is lying because she can smell female perfume coming from him, so she suspects he went out partying somewhere in secret. Merlin states he has the freedom to do whatever he wants and doesn't need Alice's permission, but Alice replies that he does need her permission since they're married. Then instantly she remembers they're not. Still, she doesn't want Merlin doing this stuff and says she has every right to control him since they're married in name at least. Merlin is dumbfounded, but he does promise not to flirt with random girls, as Alice threatens to throw him out of the house if he does. As a sudden romantic tension between them kicks in, they both avoid eye contact. Alice reluctantly tells Merlin to come to the astronomy tower tomorrow, as she wants to see Lady Da Vinci and get the key appraised. Meanwhile, Corona goes off to an icy mountain and removes the seal that was holding a mighty beast called the Frost Dragon, hoping the Frost Dragon will defeat Merlin. The next day, Merlin and Alice visit the astronomy tower and meet with Da Vinci, whose partner Rossetti, a cat girl, finds Merlin rather amusing. She asks Merlin if it's true he's married to Alice, because marrying someone like her really takes guts. Alice is already acquainted with Rossetti and Da Vinci, and she tells Merlin that Rossetti is her second least favorite person. Merlin is interested to know who the first is, and when he learns that he tops the list, it breaks his heart. In any case, Alice clarifies that she's not married to Merlin, so Rossetti takes her chance and flirts with him, telling him to team up with her instead, as he would make a great shield. Alice snatches Merlin away, stating that Merlin is only hers to have, and that makes both Rossetti and Da Vinci realize that there's some romantic tension going on here. Alice gets awkward because of her own words, so she changes the topic, showing Da Vinci the key she wants her to appraise. Da Vinci takes a look and can tell that it is related to the abyss. Merlin thinks that's troublesome, but regardless, what he wants to know is if this key leads to any treasure. Da Vinci cannot answer that just yet, claiming she needs to decipher the ancient texts and study the key thoroughly first. And Alice, trusting her, leaves her with the key and drags Merlin forcefully away from there. Back at home, Merlin is in the middle of writing a letter to Lilith, making all sorts of lies like he's the #1 adventurer here and brings in thousands of gold every day. Suddenly, his heart starts to ache in pain, and he realizes that his curse has triggered because of not slaying any strong enemies. So he rushes off to the guild, looking for a difficult quest that involves beating holy-tier enemies. Lucia overhears him and calls him over along with Alice, giving them a special quest called a designated commission, where the client is the one who gets to pick which adventurer will do the job. And this designated quest specifically asks for Merlin and Alice, requesting them to subdue a vicious dragon that is terrorizing the villagers living below Mount Nevis. Speaking of Mount Nevis, it is said that one of the 6 holy dragons, the Frost Dragon, is sealed there, and Hobbs gets scared, thinking the vicious dragon mentioned in the commission might be that holy dragon. Alice has heard from her master that the frost dragon is so strong it once froze an entire sea, turning raging waves into ice instantly. The dragon's power is said to be enough to destroy a kingdom, so surely only an elite tier like her cannot think of fighting against such a beast. Even the guild receptionist is worried, stating that only an amethyst adventurer should take such a difficult quest. But Merlin accepts it as his body is shaking from excitement, believing that if he defeats this beast, his lifespan will be extended by at least half a month. So he immediately picks Alice up on his shoulders without even hearing if she wants to go on this mission, and rushes away to the village below Mount Nevis. Currently, at the peak of Mount Nevis, Corona is communicating with the frost dragon using dragon speech, trying to command it to threaten the villagers living below the mountain. The dragon cringes at her thick-tongued speech, so it speaks in human language, agreeing to return the favor for breaking its seal. But it doesn't want to stoop as low as doing something this pathetic. Corona trembles in fear, not wanting to offend the mighty dragon any further. She apologizes, explaining that she only said so because her plan is to lure her enemy here, who is extremely powerful. But the frost dragon doesn't want to rely on petty tricks and schemes, and tells Corona that he will just go to the human city Raxum and destroy Alice and Merlin with one breath. Corona stops him from doing so, advising him not to do something reckless, revealing that his friend, the Holy Dragon of Light, made the same mistake by letting his guard down and was defeated by the strongest demon king, the ruler of pride. The frost dragon refuses to believe that the light dragon was defeated by a mere demon king and wants to take revenge. Before that, he must help Corona to defeat Merlin and Alice, and Corona assures him that Merlin and Alice will arrive very soon, as she's laid a trap, revealing she's frozen a village girl in ice. She then shapeshifts into that girl and heads to the village to lure Merlin. Merlin and Alice arrive at the village, and Alice wonders why she's feeling cold even after wearing dozens of outfits. Merlin suspects it's because of the giant iceberg on their left side. Since this is the doing of the frost dragon, Merlin worries, but not for the reason you would think. He's actually thinking about how weak the dragon must be to conjure only a tiny iceberg, and that's why he's worried the dragon may not be strong enough to increase his lifespan. A villager girl approaches them, asking if they are the great heroes who defeated the undead mage at Denbighshire. This villager girl is Corona, as revealed earlier, but Merlin and Alice don't know that, so they ask her who she is. The girl claims to be the village chief's daughter, Annie, and reveals herself as the client who requested them specifically for this quest. Merlin intuitively gets the familiar auntie vibe from this little girl and asks Annie if she's an old person in disguise. Alice immediately shuts Merlin's mouth before he ruins her reputation as well with his foul mouth. She then asks Annie about the situation, who explains that a terrifying ice dragon came here one day and threatened to freeze the entire village if the villagers didn't give young girls to it as a sacrifice. Annie cries, telling Alice that tomorrow it's going to be her turn to be sacrificed, and that she doesn't want to die young. Merlin doesn't trust Annie, as he knows that dragons in this world don't eat humans, especially the ancient ones, because humans taste awful. But Alice doesn't let Merlin be logical for once, and once again shuts him up. She then assures Annie that they will deal with the evil dragon before tomorrow and save everyone. Annie takes Alice to meet with her dad, who is working along with the other villagers to break the iceberg. The village chief tells both Alice and Merlin to go back to where they came from, claiming that they are not strong enough to fight that dragon, revealing that the dragon is one of the 6 holy dragons. Merlin's eyes glow hearing this news, and he asks the villagers to bring the dragon to him. To provoke the dragon into coming here, he just uses a finger on the iceberg instead of a hard punch, and with that gentlest of touches, the iceberg shatters into pieces, leaving everyone's mouth wide open. Merlin gets hungry and doesn't want to one-shot the dragon on an empty stomach, so he demands a proper meal before the fight. The villagers gladly give it to him, as they've now seen a glimpse of his true powers. Merlin eats a bunch and reminds the village chief about the reward, showing how greedy he is. Alice tries to balance the situation, telling the chief not to worry about the reward and also warns him that he shouldn't be speaking with Merlin, as he has no manners at all. Speaking of the payment, the village chief asks Alice how much money she wants, which confuses Alice since the offered amount was already written in the commission request. Alice tells the village chief about that, but the chief laughs, stating that his daughter doesn't even know how to write, so there's no way in hell she wrote the commission request. Before Alice can grow suspicious, Annie diverts the conversation, asking Alice to go take a dip in their hot springs, and drags poor Merlin, who has no interest at all, along with them as well. While Alice and Merlin enter the hot spring, Annie scours through their clothes in the changing room, but doesn't find the key anywhere, deciding to resort to Plan B. Meanwhile, Alice gets awkward being in the same pool as Merlin, and Merlin, not getting it, gets close to her, wanting to tell her a way to get stronger. Apparently, dragons have dragon cores inside, and if Alice eats one, she will get the power of that dragon, including their skills and magic. This is pretty convenient for Alice since she's an ice-type magic user, so getting ice-type skills from the frost dragon will be super helpful. Alice can't believe Merlin is willing to give her such an ultra-rare treasure, but Merlin states that it's useless to him since he's already at max level, so he wants her to have it, so she too can become stronger. Alice asks Merlin if he's acting like such a gentleman because he's got a crush on her, but Merlin of course doesn't have any interest in her non-existent melons. He makes it clear to her empty brain that he only wants her to become strong so that she can take SSS-ranked missions for him. In any case, Alice tells Merlin not to fall for her because she already likes Nightblade, the strongest warrior of the human continent. Merlin chokes hearing this, since he is Nightblade, and not wanting to hide that, he stands up, revealing to her that he is the legendary Nightblade she was talking about. Alice thinks of this as a joke and launches Merlin away with an uppercut, telling his ass to never insult her lover by claiming to be him again. As she begins to beat him with everything around her, Merlin tells her that Nightblade would never marry her if she doesn't change her damn attitude. Suddenly, Merlin's heart, which is shackled in chains, starts to ache again, and Alice, at that moment, strikes him with a frying pan, causing him to drown. Alice suspects that this is an act, but when he stays in there for too long, she gets him up and takes him back to the village while he is still unconscious. Great timing, as the frost dragon makes its way there. With Merlin unconscious, the only person who can deal with the dragon is the half-baked hero in a towel. Alice uses ice magic, which offends the dragon as it is literally the master of ice. The attack Alice just used was her strongest move, so she's completely out of luck. As a hero, she's at least glad that everyone else has escaped and accepts that she is going to die here. In her last moments, she just wishes to see Nightblade once again and confess her feelings to him. That's when Merlin arrives before her, tanking the dragon's attack, and seeing his back, she finally realizes that either Merlin is actually Nightblade or her brain has stopped functioning properly due to the freezing cold. Merlin slanders the dragon, calling it cute and tiny, and literally gives it a bear hug, expressing how glad he is that it has shown up. The dragon is humiliated and wonders if Merlin is mentally unstable to be making jokes when facing a holy dragon. Alice from the sidelines is also embarrassed and states that the dragon will get used to Merlin's behavior. Well, only if it survives. Merlin wants to finish the job quickly and is about to draw his sword, but Alice stops him, telling him to take the fight somewhere else. Otherwise, the village will end up getting destroyed. So Merlin calls a timeout and, picking up a small stick, throws it into the distance, telling the dragon to go fetch it. This was brutal. The dragon is furious and slams Merlin with its feet, but Merlin, with his bare hands, grabs the dragon, showing he's much stronger, and literally lifts it away into the distance like Superman. Annie comes running to Alice and hugs her, acting as if she's scared because of the dragon. But then, out of nowhere, she brings out her dagger and stabs her. Meanwhile, Merlin plays tag with the dragon until he gets bored. When the dragon realizes that its magic isn't working on Merlin at all, Merlin reveals that he is the ruler of pride. This revelation makes the dragon even more furious, stating that it will not die until it takes revenge for the Dragon of Light. Merlin explains the misunderstanding, stating that the Dragon of Light, who he's named Bucky, isn't actually dead and is currently on guard duty protecting the Demon King's palace. But the Frost Dragon doesn't believe him, calling him a lying demon. Alice has blocked Annie's attack and demands Annie to explain her goal. Annie reveals her actual form, telling Alice that she is Corona, the legendary assassin hero of the previous empire. Alice suspects that Corona wants to avenge Bernard's death, but Corona claims that she only wants the key Merlin stole at the crypt. Alice claims to have no idea where the key is, but it's clear that she's lying. So Corona wants to capture her using her genjutsu, but Alice, who's been training under Merlin, sees through the illusion, forcing Corona to take countermeasures. Another hero of the previous empire, Zoe, comes there to see Corona's battle, so Corona gets serious, not wanting to be embarrassed in front of Zoe, and defeats Alice with ease. She then gives Alice's unconscious body to Zoe, telling him to keep her as a hostage so they can force Merlin to give them the key. Merlin is about to draw his sword when his heart begins to ache in striking pain again, forcing him to petrify. Corona arrives at that moment and kicks Merlin away. She proudly tells the Frost Dragon to wait until she breaks Merlin's defenses, but the dragon doesn't want her anywhere near here. So it whacks her away with its tail, telling her to stay out of this fight, as this is not a place for filth like her. Merlin gets up again, realizing he needs to hurry, as he might actually suffer this time. He lets the Frost Dragon use one last move, and the Frost Dragon prepares its final attack, creating a giant structure of ice, intending to crush Merlin under it. But Merlin, with the slightest swing of his vortex sword, shatters the ice into pieces and also slays the dragon. The dragon, in his final moments, can't believe a demon lord has this much strength, since Merlin's power is on par with the gods of the divine era. Merlin is unsure as well, and tells the dragon to go ask the gods why he's so powerful. That is, if he goes to heaven. In any case, Merlin bids the dragon farewell, telling him it was nothing personal and that he would have considered making him his pet if he wasn't in such a dire situation himself. With the dragon's defeat, Merlin's lifespan increases, and the amount of life force he drained from the dragon makes him believe that he'll be good for the next 6 months. Corona desperately rushes to the dragon while Merlin isn't paying attention and grabs the dragon core before eating it to gain its powers. Merlin mentions that the dragon core isn't meant to be eaten raw, implying that something bad is going to happen to Corona. Initially, Corona feels amazing with her powers as a dragon and considers herself the most powerful being in the world, even though Merlin is literally standing in front of her. Merlin doesn't bother calling out Corona's delusions and only warns her that if she doesn't spit out the dragon core quickly, she'll end up stuck in this half-dragon, half-human form forever. Corona recalls how time after time Merlin has insulted her and decides it's time for retribution. Merlin thinks this bee has gotten too arrogant, forgetting the fact that the one she's facing literally one-shotted one of the 6 holy dragons. Still, Corona believes she's stronger and uses her signature assassination technique, double chokehold, but Merlin effortlessly dodges it, making it look like he didn't even move. Corona doesn't give up and keeps attacking him, but he blocks every single one of them and calls her a pathetic, delusional weakling. She still doesn't stop and flies into the sky, deciding to use the Frost Dragon's ultimate technique on Merlin. As she chants the spell in dragon speech, Merlin can't help but laugh. Her accent is just the worst. He calls out how goofy she sounds, but then apologizes for interrupting her, telling her to go ahead with what she was doing. He's getting too unbearable for her, so she decides to freeze the entire world along with him using the Frost Dragon's ultimate move, Glacial Descent. As she performs the spell, the area around her freezes solid, making her feel like she has the power of God. Merlin doesn't freeze though, even though everything else is frozen solid. He only catches a cold and runs out of patience with Corona, telling her that her worthless techniques aren't gonna work on him. Corona admits Merlin is strong, but she mentions that his carelessness has cost him the lives of the villagers and Alice, who got frozen to death due to her attack. Merlin feels sad, not for the villagers, but for losing Alice, not knowing she was already taken away by Zoe. Remembering the time he spent with Alice, he gets furious for the first time and eliminates Corona with one swing, as usual. Merlin hopes that there's still time to save Alice and wonders what he should do to melt the ice. Zoe reveals that he too got frozen due to Corona's attack, but being a holy tier hero, he's able to free himself and teleports away. But before he can close the portal, Merlin finds it and demands him to hand his roomie back over. He draws his sword, but as he strikes, Zoe closes the portal, leaving only his hand behind, which gets cut due to the attack. Merlin regrets not using his full power to fully eliminate Zoe, but he couldn't, since the slash would have destroyed everything around him, including the frozen villagers. In any case, he suspects that this guy is also after the key, which means he's taken Alice as a hostage and she's safe for now. He wonders if he should pursue Zoe, but that wouldn't benefit him, since Zoe has been revived using abyssal magic and doesn't have the life force Merlin can absorb. His heart tells him to rescue Alice, making him realize that maybe he is falling for her, but he doesn't want to turn into her puppy and wonders what he should do in this dilemma. Corona's spell dispels as she's gone, and Merlin is glad, remembering that the villagers hid in the cellars. He then stops himself, questioning how and when he started to care for humans. Meanwhile, Zoe carries Alice to where his twin brother Joey is and throws her to the ground. Joey notices that Zoe's left arm is missing, and Zoe claims that it only happened because he let his guard down. Joey, as usual, agrees with his brother, but even that triggers Zoe's anger, who tells him this is not the time to be agreeing with him. Zoe calls Joey useless for doing nothing better and is about to hit him when the prince intervenes, demanding Zoe to explain what's going on and why Corona's soul flame has gone out. Zoe informs the prince that both Corona and the Frost Dragon have been eliminated by the guy who stole the key. It seems Zoe doesn't know Merlin is the strongest demon king, so he assures the prince that he and his brother, using their fusion technique, will deal with Merlin and win for sure. The prince is running out of time, so he demands Zoe to get the key quickly, and Zoe promises that Merlin himself will come here to rescue the hostage they've captured, and then they'll surely retrieve the key. He also makes it his personal mission to slice off Merlin's arm and sew it into his own as revenge. And Joey's brother, as usual, agrees. Alice wakes up a few hours later and finds an elf girl sitting in front of her. She remembers Corona defeating her before she got knocked out and realizes this is Corona's gang's secret base. Joey enters the cellar, and seeing him, the elf girl becomes terrified, begging him not to hurt her anymore, promising to behave. Alice realizes that Joey, seemingly a shy person, is bad news, so she stabs him with her sword that she summoned using ice magic. But Joey doesn't even feel any pain and summons his own sword to punish her for not behaving like an obedient prisoner. Before dealing with Alice, Joey turns to the elf. He slices her arm and begins to drain her blood ruthlessly. Alice calls Joey a cruel maniac, and he, turning his head maniacally towards her, tells her that when he cut off his neighbor's kid's fingers, he was also called cruel. But he claims that he was forced to do it by his brother, and even now he is being forced by her brother, because if he disobeys, his brother is going to punish him. Joey goes into his own traumatic experience revolving his brother Zoe, and tells Alice that one story when Zoe told him to make their mom stop talking. When Joey failed, his brother hit him and kept hitting until he obeyed his command. The same happened when he tortured the villagers and the prisoners alive. He kept apologizing to all of his victims, but nobody ever forgave him, even though he was just a puppet of his twin brother. As he begins to cry, screaming why everyone keeps blaming him when actually his brother is the one to be blamed, Alice freaks out, realizing that this guy has definitely got some screws loose. Thankfully, this psychotic episode causes Joey to leave and saves Alice from getting tortured. Alice approaches the elf and calms her down by patting her head. She then introduces herself to her, and the elf introduces back, stating her name is Shirley. Shirley not. Shirley is not from the human kingdom, and apparently is from the southern kingdom of elves. One day she snuck out of her home to play when these bad people kidnapped here and prisoned her here. She explains that the reason why they have been collecting her blood on a daily basis is because the prince requires it to make a magic potion of life that helps him stay alive even after 400 years. When Shirley came here, she found the corpse of the previous elf in the same cell whose blood was being drained every day as well till the day she passed away. Shirley doesn't want to end up like that elf and cries, fearing she will meet the same fate. Alice hugs Shirley, promising her that someone will surely come to save them, no pun intended. She then wonders herself if she can trust Merlin to come and save them. Shirley asks who Alice thinks will come to rescue them, and Alice just goes with the answer that someone who is very important to her. On the other side, Da Vinci, who was investigating the abyssal key, falls unconscious. In her sleep, she finds herself standing before abyssal creatures, and perhaps their lord that honestly looks like a freaking medieval furnace. Merlin rushes to the astronomy tower, wanting the key back, and seeing that Da Vinci is completely spaced out, he flicks his finger on her forehead, waking her up. Now that she's conscious, Da Vinci explains to both Merlin and her freaked-out partner Rossetti that this key opens the gate to the abyss, which makes it very dangerous, so she suggests they turn it over to the kingdom. But Merlin refuses, telling Da Vinci that he needs the key to trade it for Alice, who were captured by the idiots of the previous empire. Merlin promises Da Vinci that he will handle everything once he rescues Alice, so Da Vinci returns it to him. And before leaving, he tells Da Vinci that no matter how scary the enemy is, even if they are from the abyss, he wiped them all out with a single strike. Now that Merlin has the key, the only issue is he has no idea where Alice is. Both of his demon angels suggest he takes help from the demon folk, but that would mean Merlin would have to ask for Lilith's help, who's surely going to whack him for trying to do something as graceful as save a human girl. Merlin also has the option to ask for Asmodeus's help, but he knows she too will sarcastically humiliate him. As if he wasn't annoyed enough, Arnold comes there along with Hobbs and blames Merlin for letting Alice get captured. They apparently have heard everything from Lucia, who Merlin has told everything already, and thanks to that information, they have already tracked Alice's location. Hobbs shows the map where the stronghold of the previous empire's heroes is, and Arnold states that he's already issued a 1,000,000 gold reward for anyone who's going to rescue Alice. Sahaddin, one of the members of the Thorn Paladins, has already set off to go there, so Arnold thinks they no longer need to worry for Alice. But Merlin isn't the one to sit down and wait. Well, he actually is, but because of the conflicting feelings towards Alice, he decides to act and rushes off to the enemy base. At the same time, Sahaddin has almost reached the enemy base, and he has Chapman in his army as his general. Chapman tells Sahaddin that a great man like him didn't need to come here to fend off the enemies who are reportedly weak. But Sahaddin explains that he had no other option but to do so, as the queen herself summoned him for this task. He reveals that the queen actually gave him 2 tasks. First, to secure a decisive victory against the losers of the previous empire, so that people's trust in the royal family and the Bohemian Knights get restored. And the second is to suppress the popularity of Nightblade. Chapman doesn't understand why, because he believes that they should support a hero like Nightblade. What Chapman doesn't understand is that if the commoners think vigilantes like Nightblade are their savior, their trust towards the authority will only worsen, and that is the sole reason why the queen hasn't ordered to remove the bounty on Nightblade. Anyway, from the intel Sahaddin has gathered, he believes that the elf princess of the southern kingdom, Shirley, is also imprisoned here. So if they rescue her, this will improve their kingdom's relationship with the southern kingdom. Zoe steps in Sahaddin and his army's way and strikes Sahaddin with his sword. Sahaddin blocks the incoming attacks using his shield and fights back, making Zoe cough blood. As Zoe realizes that Sahaddin is kind of strong, he takes the fight seriously and uses his shadow sword art, a legendary ancient technique that summons tens of his shadows with the same power as he does. The shadows attack Sahaddin's knights, while Zoe personally battles with Sahaddin. Merlin, who was lost in the forest, notices the explosion in the distance and rushes there, hoping he will be able to get directions to the stronghold from them. In the meantime, Sahaddin has already beaten Zoe to a pulp, but Zoe surprisingly reattaches his broken bones and then summons his brother Joey using a fusion technique to defeat Saladin. Saladin goes all out as well, but unfortunately, his shield doesn't save him from the combined power of the two brothers. With Saladin gone, the only knight alive, Chapman, fears for his life. Instead of showing this guy mercy by killing him, Joey drags him toward his brother, who wants to use him as a toy to play with until Merlin shows up. Zoe decides to use many torture methods to make Chapman scream at the top of his lungs, claiming that hearing his enemy scream gives him a whole other level of satisfaction. Of course, he makes his brother do the torturing, and as Joey is about to do so, Merlin arrives, asking Zoe if he's ready to die. Zoe comes super close to Merlin, telling him confidently that he will torture him to the point where Merlin will beg for death. Merlin pushes him back and tells Zoe that he should respect other people's personal space, and if he doesn't have the brain power to understand what he's doing wrong, Merlin advises him to go see a doctor. Zoe can't believe Merlin is not taking the situation seriously, and to make him understand how terrifying the enemies are, Zoe shows him that he and his brother have wiped out the Bohemia Knights, the strongest in the human continent. But Merlin still doesn't care because he thinks his dogs hit harder than Zoe does. This comment is too disrespectful, so to teach Merlin a lesson, Zoe decides to use the fusion technique with his brother once again. But before that, Merlin fumes in rage, demanding to know where his wife is. He quickly corrects himself, saying he meant roommate and that he doesn't have a wife. Zoe refuses to reply, telling Merlin there won't be any cooperation unless he hands over the abyssal key. But then Zoe grows too confident once he fuses with his brother and proceeds to tell Merlin that Alice is in the temple behind him because he believes Merlin won't live to rescue her. The two brothers unleash their ultimate strike, but Merlin renders the attack useless with one swipe of his sword. The only reason the two brothers survive is because of Joey, who is way stronger than Zoe. So Merlin becomes confused as to why Joey listens to a weakling's commands. Merlin's unintentional encouragement helps Joey enough that he outgrows his fear and attacks his brother. He repeatedly stabs Zoe, dealing several serious wounds, and then grabs his brother's sword, stating that he doesn't need to fuse and only requires the sword to launch the fusion technique attack. Joey then wipes out his brother using their ultimate technique. But Merlin gets bored, so he draws his vortex sword and one-shots Joey, calling it a shame that he wasn't able to absorb his life energy. With all four heroes now destroyed by Merlin, and no obstacles remaining in his way, he heads to the temple. Chapman, the only survivor, stops Merlin, asking if he's Nightblade. Merlin assumes this guy wants to arrest him, since Nightblade is still wanted, but the guy actually wants Merlin's autograph, claiming to be his biggest fan. Merlin, who's never been in this kind of situation, acts awkwardly and runs away, making Chapman think Nightblade is one shy hero. The prince realizes all of his subordinates are dead, but he still believes that Merlin is just going to come and hand over the key in exchange for Alice. So, he doesn't lose hope yet and commands his guards to bring Alice over to him. However, Alice has already escaped from her cellar with Shirley. The only problem is, she's not really great at escaping and runs into the throne room by accident, which is full of enemies. The prince commands his undeads to subdue Alice without killing her, and as they attack her, she, for once in her life, proves that she isn't completely useless. She grows confident and demands the prince surrender to her. But the prince laughs, telling her his sad backstory of how he was prince for 69 years, patiently waiting for his father to die so he could become king. But just as he was about to take the throne, the empire fell, and Alice relates that this is kinda sad. The prince continues, stating that he waited another 400 years to restore the lost empire so he could become king again, and went through all sorts of hell during this long time period. So no, he isn't going to surrender to a weak, half-baked hero like her. Alice understands Bro's situation, but at the same time, she knows how many innocent people have died and are going to die because of this old man, and that makes him a bad person, evil enough to be called a villain. She defeats all of the undeads, but the prince just summons them again. Soon enough, Alice runs out of mana and wonders if Merlin is going to come save her. Speaking of the devil, Merlin makes his grand entrance, and this is where the episode ends. Thanks for watching part 2, everyone. If you want part 3, like this video and let us know down below in the comments how much you rate this anime out of 10. I'll see you again in the next video. Ciao! Speaking of the devil, Merlin makes his grand entrance and, with a smug grin, asks Alice if he's not late or anything. Alice, in reply, barks like a total dog, saying that if it were Nightblade, he would have rescued her already and wouldn't be so late. Merlin can't believe how ungrateful this bee is. He reminds her how many times he saved her life, but still, she acts like he's never done anything for her. The old prince tries to get the two lovers' attention, but they completely ignore the old man and continue arguing. Alice claims to Merlin that she could have handled this mess by herself and doesn't need him making such dramatic entrances at the last second, as the two continue to scream at each other at the top of their lungs. Shirley, from a distance, finds their lovers' quarrel rather sweet. The prince, on the other hand, loses his patience and tells Merlin not to act cocky just because he managed to wipe out the 4 heroes. The prince boasts that he has an endless undead army, but Merlin isn't impressed. With one sweep of his sword, he erases all of the undead. In any case, he's not in the mood to beat up a loser like that ancient man, so he asks Alice to do it, saying this will be part of a training exercise. Alice had been dying to shut the prince up, so she gladly draws her sword and attacks him. Dodging his attacks, she then breaks his shield, making him realize that her sword is not ordinary. Alice proudly reveals that her sword is called Light Anthem, and it's the Holy Sword. The prince still tries to fight, but she completely disarms him, deciding to hand him over to the kingdom instead of killing him for his sin. However, Alice lets her guard down, and that allows the prince to summon a tentacle monster that grabs Shirley. As Alice focuses on saving Shirley, the prince cuts her neck, intoxicating her with a poison that makes her unable to move. Now, the tables have turned, and the prince thinks he's won, because surely Merlin won't ever think of attacking him while his precious Alice is captive. Merlin, on the other hand, begins to insult Alice for losing to such a weakling, and literally calls her Queen of all noobs. Alice defends herself even in this state, screaming to Merlin that she didn't lose, it's just that the old man cheated. She points fingers at Merlin instead, stating that he didn't protect Shirley, and that's why Alice got distracted, which resulted in things turning out this way. Merlin asks why he would ever protect someone he doesn't know for free. As the two start shouting and screaming again, the prince gets sick of it, telling them both to stop flirting already. The prince tells Merlin that he's infected Alice with his corpse poison, and only he has the antidote. So, if Merlin wants Alice to live, he'll have to hand over the abyssal key he stole from Bernard. Merlin becomes serious, asking the old man if he even knows what this key can do, explaining that the key opens the gate between the abyss and reality. Merlin asks the ancient man if he has somehow already made contact with the apostles of the abyss. The prince laughs, amused by the fact that this guy knows about the apostles of the abyss. He asks Merlin how he knows about them, and whether he's made some deal with them as well to become this strong. Merlin literally spits on the ground, stating that he isn't interested in such things, as he would never kneel to anyone. But since the prince is interested, it means he must have already become a lapdog of the apostles, or worse, the king of the abyss. Merlin belittles the prince, calling it a shame that even though he is of royalty, he has no dignity at all. The prince, at this point in age, no longer cares about dignity. The only thing he cares about is absolute power, and he believes he can get that only by opening the gates of the abyss. He admits that he's indeed made a deal with the king of the abyss, and in return, the king has promised to grant him eternal life, youth, ultimate power, and an invincible abyssal army. The prince believes that with all that, he'll be able not only to rule the continent, but also the entire world, with everyone kneeling at his feet. Now, the prince hurts Alice, stabbing her in the neck with his dirty fingers, and once again, demands Merlin to hand over the key. Alice, even in pain, tells Merlin not to do it, because everything will be lost if the old man gets his hands on the key. Merlin, however, doesn't listen to Alice and drops the key from his hand, telling the prince to go fetch it. The prince, lost in greed, lets go of Alice and grabs the key, forgetting the fact that Merlin, the strongest demon king, is standing right in front of him. Merlin then helps Alice get up and tells her that he's decided to let Prince do whatever he wants because he wants to see if there's someone in the Hell Legion of the Abyss worthy enough to be his rival. Alice calls Merlin an idiot, telling him again and again that the world will end if the prince opens the gate. Merlin catches her by surprise, kissing her on the lips, which also cures her poison. Alice doesn't notice that and punches Merlin in the face, accusing him of trying to take advantage of her in this situation. Merlin explains that he only kissed her to heal her, reminding her of the time when he used her saliva to heal her wounds. Alice, who knows about the side effects, asks Merlin what would happen if she now starts to hallucinate about Nightblade, and Merlin, in reply, murmurs that she doesn't need to, because the real Nightblade is right in front of her. Anyway, Alice wants to move on from this awkward moment, so she asks Merlin to go save Shirley from the tentacle monster. Merlin, surprisingly, listens to Alice and, with one slash of his sword, eliminates the tentacle monster, freeing Shirley. Shirley runs to hug Alice, saying Alice kept her promise when she said that her most trusted partner would come to rescue them. Alice becomes shy, and Merlin, hearing that for the first time, smiles instead of roasting her. Meanwhile, the prince places the key on the altar, opening the abyssal gate, causing the entire area to be engulfed with the scent of death from the abyss. The scent causes Shirley to faint, but Merlin doesn't get concerned at all. As countless undead flood into this world from the abyss, Merlin keeps watching, but when Alice starts screaming at him to do something, he finally decides to take action. He gets serious and unleashes his full power, emanating an aura that creates shockwaves strong enough to knock out any living being. But he doesn't stop there. He draws his sword and delivers a devastating strike that annihilates all of the undead and even destroys the gate of the abyss, cleansing the world in an instant. Alice is left in awe. She can't believe how overwhelmingly strong Merlin is. She keeps watching as Merlin suddenly falls into despair. He can't believe he just slayed countless, maybe thousands, of holy tier undeads in a matter of seconds, and yet couldn't even drain their life force because they're undead. He calls it a waste and imagines a life where he could have slacked off without worrying about the curse if only the monsters of the abyss weren't undead. The prince, who's somehow still alive, only for comedy's sake, starts crying profusely as he watches his dream of restoring the previous empire get torn to shreds by a single man. 100 years of effort all turned to dust because of Merlin. He demands to know who Merlin really is and what he wants. Merlin simply claims to be an ordinary adventurer and doesn't reveal why he's so powerful. He even lies that he just followed the One Punch Man workout routine to get this strong. The prince can't believe that someone this powerful is only working as an adventurer. With his strength, Merlin could easily rule the world, so he asks, why isn't Merlin doing just that? Merlin replies that he has no ambition to sit on the throne, even though he's literally a demon king. The prince, unaware of this, tries to educate him, saying that if Merlin becomes king, he'll have endless wealth, countless beauties, a harem, everything imaginable. But Merlin, who is quite literally drowning in debt, tells the prince how delusional that is. He explains that once you're king, you're stuck working day and night. And the paperwork, oh, the never-ending paperwork. You can't afford to mess up because the council will immediately point fingers at you and curse you, even though you've been working your ass off. Even after all that effort, those useless council members leech off your success and call you a useless king. It's a soul-draining cycle that drags you down until you forget what life even feels like. Even sleeping becomes a distant dream, not to mention the mountain of debt you can never repay. Of course, all this only applies to Merlin, since he's useless at anything other than fighting. But still, this is exactly why he'd rather be a lazy, carefree adventurer than a king who rules the world. The ancient prince can't believe that this guy gave up power and ambition just because he wants to sleep. But it seems Merlin has opened the eyes of the walking corpse. The prince gets on his knees, calling Merlin a divine being, which honestly makes sense considering no one has ever been able to defeat him. Then the prince runs off to who knows where, and Merlin just goes, "What is even up with this dude?" Alice thinks the old man's going through a mental breakdown, but she's at least happy that everything is finally over. With the crisis averted, Merlin, Alice, and Shirley, who's still unconscious, are now on their way back to Wraxham in a carriage. Inside, Alice tries to make conversation with Merlin. He assumes she wants to thank him for everything, so he tells her to pay him in gold instead of words. But obviously, that's not why Alice wants to talk. Why would she thank him when, in her mind, he's the one to blame for this whole mess? She tells him that if they had just handed the key over to the kingdom, they wouldn't have gotten involved in the business of the previous empire, and she wouldn't have gotten kidnapped. Merlin doesn't bother replying, knowing he can never win against this loudmouth. Alice eventually calms down and continued, asking Merlin why he let the walking corpse get away. Merlin explains that the old man is useless and not worth wasting another minute on, but Alice disagrees. She thinks the old man has done a lot of damage and must be brought to justice. Merlin argues that the kingdom can deal with it. It's not his job to be a hero. The only reason he stepped in was to rescue. Merlin stops mid-sentence, clearly about to say Alice's name. Alice picks up on it and asks him to finish his sentence. He makes up an excuse, saying he just felt like saving the day and that he definitely didn't risk everything to save a useless, half-baked hero like her, even though that's exactly what he did. This sparks another round of arguing, which wakes Shirley up. Seeing she's in a carriage, she assumes she's being sold off again. Alice calms her down and tells her that Merlin wiped out the entire Hell Legion for them. Shirley can't believe Big Bro Merlin is that powerful. In any case, she's happy and introduces herself to Merlin, asking if he's really Alice's lover, since Alice kept saying over and over that Merlin would definitely come to save them. Alice blushes and refuses to admit it. Merlin gets the last laugh, asking if she was crying her eyes out waiting for him. Alice tells him to shut up, refusing to admit that, yes, that's exactly what happened. Just then, the carriage stops, and Alice falls on top of Merlin. The door opens, and Hobbs and Rossetti find them in this position. They can't help but ask if the two are already spending their honeymoon in there. Jokes aside, they head to the Adventurers Guild, where they celebrate Alice and Merlin's big W. Rossetti loudly commends Merlin for risking it all to save his dear wife. At the same time, she whispers to him not to waste his youth on a short-tempered hag like Alice, and to go on a ride with her instead. Alice hears that and immediately drags Merlin away, telling Rossetti that he's busy with her. Shirley calls out to Merlin and Alice, asking if they'll take a commission from her to escort her home. Alice says there's no need for all the formalities. She would have done it anyway. But Merlin flat out refuses, saying he's not a charity worker and that he is not going to work for free. Alice is about to murder him on the spot. Not wanting the couple to fight, Shirley promises to give Merlin her entire allowance as a reward, which, as a princess, amounts to 10 million gold. Both Merlin and Alice are completely petrified. Merlin just hit the jackpot. All this time he was neglecting Shirley, but now he treats her with the utmost respect, kissing her hand and telling her to go ahead and file the commission. Just then, Lucia arrives and informs them of another commission, this one from Cecilia, who immediately screams at Merlin, demanding to know why he didn't come save her at the crypt. Since he ditched her last time, she insists he has to help her now. And Merlin? He's never been happier to take on more commissions. This is where part 2 ends. If you want the next part, make sure to like this video, and we'll bring it to you at the speed of light. Thanks for watching. Ciao.